Chapter 4381. The Sky Beacon mountain range was majestic and unending, with numerous peaks standing in great numbers. The Sky Peak, the head of all the peaks, was like a sharp sword that pierced through the earth, piercing the heavens. Fong, the sacred peak of the mountain range, was the Skylink Peak. With the Skylink Peak at the front, it was surrounded by towering peaks. The peaks were clustered together like stars surrounding the moon. The entire Feng Tian Fate sect was in this forest. A long time ago, the Feng Tian sect, the sect's predecessor, was once a faction that stood at the peak of the heavenly plains. Back then, the Feng Tian sect was like the current Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. It had absolute power in the sacred world. But now, the sect had fallen to the level of a mediocre faction. Even a mid-tier faction like the Heaven Martial Association was more famous than the Feng Tian Fate sect. However, as the saying went, a centipede died but never fell down. Namely, even now, the overall strength of the Feng Tian Fate sect was still very strong. It was still above average among the mid-tier sections. In the past, the Feng Tian Fate sect had been cold and quiet due to its small number of disciples. But even today, the entire Beacon Heaven Fate sect was in full swing. Half a month ago, the sect master, Leng Shuang Wuchen, suddenly announced the start of the Sky Beacon selection. As the name suggested, the Sky Beacon selection was a public recruitment of disciples. However, the Feng Tian Fate School had been in decline for a long time. The last selection was millions of years ago. Although the Feng Tian Fate sect was recruiting young disciples, they were small in scale. Most of them were recruited by the sect itself. Like this was the first time in millions of years that such a large-scale selection was held from the outside. After a long period of decline, the Feng Tian Fate sect was like a giant tree that was on the verge of death. Was it really appropriate to hold such a large selection? Thus, the Feng Tian Fate sect was divided into two factions for this selection. Lethe spectators believed that the Heavens Beacon School could use this opportunity to regain its former glory. The pessimistic faction believed that this hurried selection would push the already shaky Heaven Fate sect into a bottomless abyss. But it was sect leader Leng Shuang Wuchen's insistence that led to today's situation. At this time, the various peaks of the Feng Tian Fate sect were busy building their arenas in preparation for the selection in 3 days. Very apart from the main peak and a few secondary peaks, the entire sect was open to the public. Everyone could come and go as they pleased. Nie Tian and Tang 13 arrived at one of the gates of the Feng Tian Fate School. Looking around at the bustling scene, they couldn't help but smile. It seems like they value you, the Beacon Emperor, a lot, for them to make such a big scene to welcome you. Tang 13 chuckled and teased. I didn't expect the Feng Tian Ming School to hold the selection at this time. Nie Tian shook his head with a bitter smile. He wasn't sure if Leng Shuang Wuchen was doing this on purpose. Back in the dark domain, Nie Tian had already told Leng Shuang Wuchen that he would return to the Feng Tian Fate sect after dealing with the matters here. Cold was Leng Shuang Wuchen really holding the selection at this time to welcome Nie Tian, the Beacon Emperor? You too, what are you doing? At this time, a cultivator from the Feng Tian Fate School appeared. He was dressed like a guard and pointed at Nie Tian and Tang 13. We're not doing anything. We're just looking around. Tang 13 faintly smiled and said calmly, if you're here to participate in the selection, then I welcome you on behalf of the sect. If not, then please leave immediately. The guard spoke coldly. You're here to participate in the selection. But if you're not, then please leave. Nie Tian couldn't help but smirk. He wanted to say something, but Tang 13 beat him to it. Brother, we're here to participate in the selection. Tang 13 smiled and nodded. The guard stared at Nie Tian and Tang 13 for a long time before saying, since you're here to participate, sign up over there. After that, stay at your place and don't wander around. Okay. Tang 13 smiled again and turned to Nie Tian. Brother Nie, let's go. Nie Tian couldn't help but smile, but he still followed Tang 13. The two arrived at the place to sign up. There were many people, but only a few were truly strong. Nie scanning with his heaven spirit, he found that the people in front of him were all godly realm cultivators. They weren't young either, at least a few thousand years old. Some were even tens of thousands of years old. In the sacred world, if one couldn't break through to the saint realm before the age of 10,000, they wouldn't be able to achieve anything great. Strictly speaking, if his age before his rebirth was taken out, Nie Tian wasn't even 100 years old yet, but he was already at the peak of the Heaven King realm. Moreover, he wasn't born in the saint realm. He fought his way up from the bottom. Opposite. Looking at these cultivators who were born in the sacred world, they were already several thousand years old, but they were still stuck at the celestial emperor realm. With this comparison, it was clear how talented Nie Tian was. No. Although the Heaven Beacon sect had set a low standard for the Heaven Beacon selection, it wasn't that they didn't reject anyone. Then nearly half of the people were directly eliminated. They didn't even have the right to sign up. Soon, it was Nie Tian and Tang 13's turn. Name, age, realm. The cultivator in charge of signing up was a middle-aged man. He had a cold expression and looked fierce. Nie Tian, 3,000 years old, Tribulation Realm. Nie Tian nodded after some thought. He purposely reported his age and vaguely said that he was in the Tribulation Realm. He didn't want this person to be too shocked. However, the person's eyes trembled when he heard Nie Tian's words. He stood up and looked at Nie Tian suspiciously. Kid, are you really in the heavenly tribulation realm? The man couldn't help but ask with a grim expression, are you really in the heavenly tribulation realm? He didn't believe that there was someone in this world who could step into the tribulation realm at the age of 3,000. But it was extremely rare for a top genius in the sacred world to reach the sage realm before the age of 1,000. As for reaching the tribulation realm at the age of 3,000, that was definitely the most monstrous existence in the sacred world. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He only smiled faintly and pressed his hand on the person's shoulder. With a light push, the person sat back down. You! The person's expression changed. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Just now, when Nie Tian's hand had landed on his shoulder, he had felt as if there was a mountain on his shoulder. As soon as Nie Tian had exerted force, he had found it hard to support his entire body, and had been forced to sit down. He was already a celestial emperor. Although he was only in the first stage, his martial body was already very strong. But compared to Nie Tian, the gap between them was far too wide. If Nie Tian said he was in the sky martial realm, he would believe it. Chapter 4382. Nie Tian took a glance at the man, picked up his identity medallion, and walked to the side. Nie Tian, if all the people signing up at the Feng Tian Fate School are like this, then I'm afraid it won't work. After signing up, Tang 13 walked up to Nie Tian and sighed. Nie Tian nodded solemnly, his heart silent. How could he not see that these cultivators who came to participate in the selection were generally not very talented? Almost half of them could only be considered mediocre. If the Destiny sect recruited these people, their future would be bleak. There are still a few more days to sign up. Let's see if there are any geniuses that show up. Tang 13 laughed, trying to comfort Nie Tian. The two didn't stay any longer and continued to stroll around the various peaks of the Feng Tian Fate sect. Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry to meet the higher-ups of the Fire Heaven Fate sect. He wasn't in a hurry to reveal his identity as the Beacon Emperor. Looking around with this ordinary identity, he could see the overall situation of the Heaven Beacon sect. The Feng Tian Fate sect had been in decline for a long time. Each peak was old and even a bit shabby. Namely, even the larger mountain gates where some elders were located were very simple. They didn't look like a large sect at all. However, each and every mountain gate was guarded by a gigantic stone statue. Nie Tian had long since noticed that these stone statues were extraordinary. Each and every one of them was engraved with ancient and mysterious runes. Not only that, the aura of these runes was also extraordinary, containing a powerful energy. Looks like these statues were left behind during the Feng Tian Fate sect's glory days. They were used to guard the sect. Nie Tian secretly guessed in his heart. He used his divine sense to probe the stone statues, but he was actually unable to unravel the path of the runic patterns. Nie Tian, the runes carved on these stone statues are all extremely ancient fate and soul runes. Although so many years have passed, the power of these runes hasn't weakened at all. At this moment, the fat cat opened her mouth and said, "I'm guessing that the people who carved these stone statues were extremely powerful martial artists with fate charts. It's highly possible that these runes were carved by them with their lifeblood. I'm afraid that each of these statues has the power of a sky martial divine ancestor." "These stone statues are that strong?" When Nie Tian heard Fat Cat's words, he couldn't help but feel shocked. These statues were everywhere, covering the entire sect. Almost every peak had dozens of them. Some of the larger mountain gates even had over 100 stone statues. The strength of each stone statue was comparable to the strength of a sky martial saint ancestor, which was terrifying. This if all the stone statues were activated at the same time, even the experts from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor's Hall wouldn't be able to do anything to the Feng Tian Fate sect. These stone statues are not as simple as they seem. The fat cat smiled mysteriously and continued, "I've already seen it. These stone statues are all connected to each other. The stone statues at each of the mountain gates are a stone formation. And the mountain gates are also closely connected to each other. I'm afraid they can also form a large formation. If I'm not wrong, the entire Feng Tian Fate sect's stone statues are all connected to form an extremely large stone statue formation." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he was extremely shocked. There were probably tens of thousands of stone statues in the entire Feng Tian Fate sect. If they were all connected to form a formation, how terrifying would that be? If this stone statue formation is activated, I'm afraid it's many times stronger than the defensive formation of the Wan Yuan Pavilion. The fat cat nodded and said solemnly. Nie Tian swallowed his saliva and couldn't say anything for a long time. He didn't expect the fallen Feng Tian sect to still have such a powerful stone formation. First, the Myriad Essence Pavilion's Guardian Grand Array protected the entire vast cloud sacred city under the Armageddon. But the stone statue formation of the Feng Tian Fate sect was many times stronger than the defensive formation of the Wan Yuan Pavilion. How could Nie Tian not be shocked? "Fat, can you activate this stone statue formation?" After a long time, Nie Tian reacted. His eyes were filled with unconcealable passion as he asked with a trembling voice. If the stone statue formation was activated, the Feng Tian Fate sect would become the safest place in the all-heaven sacred world. The fat cat was stunned. He then shook his head with a smile. "Not to mention me, even the people of the Feng Tian Fate sect can't activate the stone statue formation. I'm afraid even the sect master of the Feng Tian Fate sect doesn't know the secret of these stone statues." Nie Tian frowned and didn't know what to say. "Nie Tian, don't think too much. These stone statues might be useless now, but they should be activated automatically when the Feng Tian Fate sect is in a life-or-death situation." The fat cat obviously knew what Nie Tian was thinking and smiled. With a bitter expression, Nie Tian shook his head and smiled. A moment of life and death? If the stone statue formation could only be activated at the last moment, its effect would be greatly reduced. But on the other hand, as long as the stone statues existed, the Feng Tian Fate sect wouldn't be destroyed. It was a blessing in disguise. From the stone statue formation, it could be seen that the Feng Tian Fate sect was indeed very powerful. As expected of an existence that ruled over the all-heaven sacred world. Noni Tian was also very confused. According to the fat cat, these stone statues were carved by cultivators with powerful natal horoscope. They had undoubtedly paid a great price. Why did they pay such a great price to create these stone statues? Could it be that the Feng Tian sect faced an extremely powerful enemy back then? If in the current all-heaven sacred world, the strongest existences that Nie Tian had seen were the Yang God Sword Emperor and the defiant demon Li Yuan. No, even someone as powerful as the Yang God couldn't easily destroy the protective formation of the myriad Yuan Pavilion, let alone the stone statue formation before him. Could it be that the Feng Tian sect had once faced an existence that was even more terrifying than the Yang God Sword Emperor? Was to Nie Tian, the Yang God Sword Emperor had already reached the peak of martial art. Actually, he couldn't imagine how shocking it would be for someone stronger than the Yang God. If I have time, I'll study this stone statue properly, Nie Tian muttered to himself as he looked at the stone statue before him. One beside him, Tang 13 stared at the stone statue in a daze for a long time. She seemed to be deep in thought. What did you see? Nie Tian couldn't help but ask as he looked at Tang 13. After all, Tang 13 had the ghost eye. She might be able to see deeper information from the stone statue. But at this moment, before Tang 13 could speak, a deep voice came from nearby. Who are you? Nie Tian raised his head and saw a white-robed young man walking over. There were two purple-robed women standing beside him. The white-robed young man was tall and handsome. The first impression he gave off was that he was a modest gentleman, gentle as jade. He didn't look very old, but his aura was very steady. His entire body's aura was as vast and vigorous as the sea. Tianju Holy Emperor. Nie Tian could sense the white-robed young man's cultivation. He couldn't help but be shocked. Chapter 4383. Nie Tian stared at the white-robed young man in front of him in shock. The young man in white looked very young, but he was already a Tianjue divine emperor. His talent was terrifying. Nie Tian had a feeling that the white-robed young man's talent was even close to that of Lin Fan, the young human emperor. The two purple-clothed women beside the white-clothed youth were beautiful and had graceful figures. They were definitely beauties that could topple cities. Also, the two girls looked the same. They were twins. Nie Tian, this person is not easy to deal with. Tang 13 glanced at the young man in white and sent a voice transmission to Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded slightly and looked at the young man in white. He smiled and said, "We are here to participate in the selection of the Feng Tian Fate sect. We just signed up and have nothing to do, so we are looking around." The young man in white stared at Nie Tian for a few seconds and said, "Where is the token?" Nie Tian didn't care. He signaled Tang 13 with his eyes. The two took out their tokens and showed them to the young man in white. "Since you have signed up, go back to your place and don't wander around." The young man in white confirmed that the token was real, returned it, and said coldly. Tang 13 took the token and said, "Isn't the Feng Tian Fate sect open to the public? It's fine if we look around." The young man in white's face darkened. Just because the Feng Tian Fate sect is open doesn't mean you can wander around. Before you pass the Sky Beacon selection, you are all outsiders. You are not allowed to spy on our sect's sacred grounds. Tang 13's lips twitched. She understood what the young man in white meant. He thought they were spies from other sections. "Young master, these two are sneaky. They must be spies from other sects." Just then, one of the girls in purple spoke. She didn't care about Nie Tian and Tang 13 and said directly, "They have been staring at these statues for a long time. They must be spies from other sects," the other girl in purple also said. Her tone was very firm. Tang 13 frowned and was speechless. She said, "Sisters, you can't say things without evidence." "Bastard! Who's your sister?" A lady in purple frowned. She was enraged. The long sword on her back was unsheathed. A ray of sword chi howled and headed straight for Tang 13. Sadly, Tang 13's reflexes were fast. She tilted her body slightly and dodged the attack. The lady in purple gasped. She didn't think Tang 13 would react so quickly. Courting death. Just then, the other lady in purple growled. The sword on her back slashed across the sky, and a ray of light appeared. In an instant, it transformed into 3 silhouettes of swords that slashed down towards Tang 13. Tang 13 frowned. Her body was neither too fast nor too slow. She walked slowly and perfectly dodged the 3 sword shadows. What a strange movement skill! When the white-robed young man saw this, he couldn't help but be shocked. These 2 maidservants of his had already attained the realm of sword heavenly tribulation, and their sword techniques were light and graceful, swift and fierce. However, Tang 13 was able to dodge the 2 women's attacks. Her movement skills were impressive. Nie Tian was startled by Tang 13 as well. He didn't think she would have such a skill. Honestly speaking, Nie Tian could also dodge the attacks of the 2 ladies in purple. But he wouldn't be able to do it as easily as Tang 13. Kill him! The 2 ladies in purple were infuriated after failing to dodge. After exchanging glances, Killer's intent grew. Then, the 2 of them attacked at the same time. Swords howled and headed straight for Tang 13. Tang 13 stomped on the ground and leaped up into the sky. She dodged again. Damn it! The 2 women growled at the same time. Their silhouettes dashed up into the sky. Their swords howled and their chi engulfed the entire area. Nie Tian's face was calm. He didn't interfere and instead, he watched the battle with interest. These 2 ladies in purple were not weak. They were of the 5th level of the god's realm, and their swordsmanship had also reached the 5th level. Out of their generation, they were heaven's favorite. However, with their capabilities, it was far from enough to threaten Tang 13. Tang 13 was already very capable. After being saved by Mori Shire, her cultivation improved. Within a short period of time, she had reached the peak of the 9th level of the god's realm. Nie Tian guessed that Tang 13's sudden increase in cultivation had something to do with the seed of Hades inside her. The young man in white watched as well. He had no intention of interfering. High up in the sky, Tang 13 and the 2 ladies in purple exchanged more than 10 rebuttals in the blink of an eye. However, Tang 13 had been dodging all this time. From start to finish, she had not made a move. It was obvious that he was merely playing and didn't consider this a real battle. The more he did this, the angrier the 2 ladies became. Slowly, the 2 ladies in purple attacked more and more aggressively. They even gave up on defense and focused on killing Tang 13. I won't argue with you 2. But you can't go too far. Tang 13 dodged a sword shadow and became impatient. He said coldly, "Do you really think I am a soft-footed shrimp?" Just now, he had countless chances to defeat the 2 ladies. He just didn't want to. But if these 2 continue to push him, then they can't blame him for being merciless. You bastard, all you know how to do is dodge. If you have any real abilities, then use them. The 2 women roared in unison. Then, they moved and stood back to back. The sword wills around them fused together perfectly. Instantly, their auras increased exponentially. You 2 stupid girls, you're playing for real. Tang 13 felt the power of the sword and couldn't help but to frown. The color of her eyes changed. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian could not help but frown. These 2 ladies were twins and their blood was connected. Even their swords were resonating with each other. Now that their swords had merged, it was obvious that they were going to use their true abilities and fight to the death against Tang 13. Nie Tian wasn't worried about Tang 13. What he was worried about was that once the battle goes out of control, Tang 13 will accidentally hurt these 2. The Feng Tianming sect was already in a precarious situation. These 2 ladies were definitely the best of the younger generation. If they get hurt, then it wouldn't be good. Lan Qing, Lan Che, stop right now. Just then, the man in white opened his mouth and yelled. The twin sisters, Lan Qing and Lan Che, looked at the man in white at the same time. Feeling the seriousness in his eyes, they didn't want to, but they retracted their swords. Seeing this, Tang 13's lips twitched and her eyes returned to normal. If they continue to fight, he really wouldn't be able to control himself. Master, why are you telling us to stop? Lan Qing and Lan Che landed and asked unwillingly. You are no opponent of his. The man in white's eyes were cold. Though he was answering Lan Qing, his eyes were staring at Tang 13. He didn't think that Tang 13's capabilities would be so strange. How could he not tell that Tang 13 didn't reveal her true capabilities? She was just playing a game. The silver-haired man next to Tang 13 had an even stranger temperament. It seemed like he was harder to deal with than Tang 13. If these two really were spies from another house, then it would be troublesome. Chapter 4384. How is that possible? He only knows how to dodge and doesn't even have the courage to fight us head-on. Lan Che didn't want to argue with the man saying that they were no match for Tang 13. If I fought you head-on, you would have been 2 corpses by now. Tang 13 glanced at Lan Qing and Lan Che. She smiled speechlessly. Lan Che's eyes trembled and her face turned red. She couldn't speak. Tang 13, on the other hand, looked to the side and ignored them. The man in white was much calmer now and his attitude was more cautious. He looked at Nie Tian. I am Wen Luan, the head disciple of the Feng Tianming school. May I ask how I should address you two? I'm Nie Tian, and he's Tang 13. Nie Tian nodded slightly and smiled calmly. So this person was Wen Luan, the head disciple of the Feng Tianming school. No wonder he was so talented. If Wen Luan had this attitude from the beginning, the scene just now wouldn't have happened. Are the two of you really here to participate in the selection? Wen Luan asked after a moment of silence. How could he not see that both Nie Tian and Tang 13 were as talented as he was? Even the peak organizations of the All-Heaven Saints world would put in a lot of effort to nurture such a talented person. Why would they be interested in the Feng Tianming school? Though Wen Luan didn't want to speculate, he still needed to know why Nie Tian and Tang 13 were here. As the head disciple of the Feng Tianming school, he wouldn't allow anyone to threaten the school. Our main purpose in coming to the Feng Tian Fate sect is not to participate in the selection. Nie Tian thought for a moment, but I can promise you that we have no ill intentions towards the Feng Tianming school. Also, if nothing unexpected happens, you will soon find out who I am. Wen Luan stared at Nie Tian for a long time before nodding. I will believe you for now, but if you truly threaten the Feng Tianming school, I will not let you go. As the head disciple of the Feng Tianming school, I swear to protect the school with my life. Yes. Nie Tian nodded his head. He suddenly felt that this Wen Luan was a little cute and couldn't help smiling. Perhaps we will become friends in the future. I hope we don't become enemies. Wen Luan replied coldly before turning around and leaving with Lan Qing and Lan Che. That Wen Luan fellow is quite interesting. Tang 13 could not help but chuckle as she watched Wen Luan and the other two leave. Nie Heaven nodded and smiled. He also thought that Wen Luan was a talent that could be molded. He might be a bit strict, but he had his own principles and wasn't stupid. At the very least, he knew when to advance and when to retreat. Still, Wen Luan's 2 maids were not bad, especially when they worked together. They could pose a threat to ordinary sky martial divine ancestor experts. Only unfortunately, they were unlucky this time. Their opponent was Tang 13, a genius. This from the looks of it, the Feng Tian Fate sect still had some talent. Tang 13, did you see anything in the stone statue? Nie Tian suddenly remembered the scene of Tang 13 staring blankly at the stone statue. I can sense that the runes inscribed on this stone statue contain an extremely powerful energy. Tang 13 stared at the stone statue again and frowned. She looked confused and said, "Just now I used my ghost eye to check. It seems that the power of the runes stimulates the seed of Yellow Springs." You can already feel the existence of the seed of Yellow Springs? Nie Tian's expression changed as he asked in surprise. Before, Tang 13 could not feel the seed of Yellow Springs. Now that she could feel it, it meant that the seed of Yellow Springs had become stronger. Yes. Tang 13 nodded and said, Nie Tian, I feel that the runes on the stone statue may be able to help me restrain the seed of Yellow Springs. Nie Tian frowned and his expression did not look good. The runes on the stone statue were fate runes from a long time ago. There was no doubt that the power contained within was strong. However, the runes had already become one with the stone statue. No matter how strong it was, it could not be used. No. Speaking of Nie Tian and Tang 13, even Fat Cat could not remove the fate runes from the stone statue. Seeing that Nie Tian did not speak, Tang 13 did not say anything else. Though he felt that the runes on the stone statue were strange, he knew that the seed of Yellow Springs was not something that could be easily suppressed. The 12th of the Yellow Springs was the prophesied person who would destroy the world. He had already been reincarnated 12 times. It was obvious how terrifying the seed of Yellow Springs was. However, Tang 13 was not disappointed. He was not an ordinary person. His identity was recognized by the Shura tribe as the Holy Demon Blood Lord. How could he be possessed so easily? Maybe Ling Shuang Wuchun has a way. Nie Tian did not think too much about the stone statue. Instead, he felt that Ling Shuang Wuchun might be able to help Tang 13. Nie Tian, let's take a look around. Tang 13 looked very optimistic. She smiled faintly and walked towards another mountain gate. Nie. The two of them walked around aimlessly. They were not in a hurry. After a while, Nie Tian suddenly realized that many people were moving towards the same direction. It was as if something had happened. Brother, can I ask what happened over there? Nie Tian stopped a person and asked. Don't you know? Gia sect's warriors came to provoke us. They have already injured more than 10 disciples. The person glanced at Nie Tian and said hurriedly. Then, he hurried over. Gia sect provoked us? Nie Tian frowned and his face darkened. Look, he, the Beacon Emperor, came at the right time. Not only did he encounter the selection of his own sect's disciples, but he also encountered the provocation from another sect. Let's go and take a look. Tang 13's eyes lit up. She laughed excitedly. The two of them followed the crowd and soon, they arrived at a plaza outside the gate. At this moment, high up in the sky, a fierce battle was taking place. 2 martial artists stood in the air. One of them wore a green robe and was a disciple of the Fengtian sect. The other wore a black robe and wore a ghost mask. His face was green and his fangs were sharp. He looked extremely ferocious and was a disciple of the Gia sect. Bang! Just then, the two of them moved at the same time. After a muffled sound, one of them flew backwards, leaving a bloody trail in the air. The crowd. The person's eyes widened as he saw clearly that the one who flew out was a disciple of the Fengtian sect. You wretch! The disciple stabilized himself in the air and lifted his head to look at the masked warrior. He wanted to say something but puked out a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as paper. Huh! Are all the Fengtian sect's warriors useless? None of them can fight. The masked warrior snickered coldly. He glanced at the crowd and shouted, If that's the case, then why don't you change your name to the useless Fate sect? Ha! Baidu search 881 Chinese net. No advertisement. Chapter 4385. Omega 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 choking with sobs. Novel The masked cultivator easily defeated the disciples of the Fengtian Fate sect and was extremely arrogant. He swept his gaze across the crowd below and directly changed the name of the Fengtian Fate sect to the Trash Fate sect. His words caused an intense reaction from the Fengtian Fate sect. This guy is too arrogant. This is our Fengtian Fate sect's territory. This person is indeed arrogant, but his strength is truly formidable. Just now, he was already the 46th challenger. Ah yes. Plus, he just defeated Ling Feng, one of the best third-generation disciples in our sect. He might even be in the top 10. Even Ling Feng was defeated by this person. Has our Feng Tian Fate sect really declined to this point? Everyone was discussing. Although they were all furious, no one dared to attack again. Ling Feng was already very strong, but he was easily defeated by the ghost mask martial artist. If an ordinary disciple were to make a move, it would be tantamount to courting death. Trash, life sect trash, listen up, I am Su Tu, a third-generation disciple of Gia sect. At this time, the masked martial artist announced his name and laughed wildly. I, Su Tu, am not in the top 100 among the third-generation disciples of Gia sect. But it's more than enough to beat trash like you. Your useless life sect has fallen to this point, and you still want to organize the Sky Beacon selection? Aren't you just looking for death? Tu was very arrogant, but he wasn't lying. With his strength, he really couldn't be considered as an outstanding talent of the Gia sect. Just like that, even so, they still managed to defeat more than 40 disciples from the Feng Tian Fate School. It was clear to see how much the school had fallen. Heaven's gaze dimmed as he looked at Su Tu from afar with a calm expression. Su Tu had made it very clear that the reason why the Gia sect was provoking them at this time was obviously because of the Sky Beacon selection. This selection was viewed as a chance for the Heaven Beacon sect to rise, so the other sects would naturally view it as a threat. In every sacred world, there would be conflicts between sects, and the seventh sacred world of cultivators was no exception. Tens of thousands of years ago, even when the Wind Beacon Fate sect was in decline, it relied on its previous heritage to firmly occupy the ruling position in the seventh sacred cultivators world. But in the recent tens of thousands of years, due to the further decline of the sect itself, coupled with the departure of some of the higher-ups of the sect, as well as the internal strife within the sect, the strength of the Fire Heaven Fate sect was greatly reduced, causing the Fire Heaven Fate sect to lose its ruling position in the sacred world of seventh cultivators. At the same time, many sects in the sacred world of seventh cultivators began to raise their head. Then, the various sects began to fight for the right to rule. After thousands of years of fighting, two great sects finally stood out and gained a certain amount of ruling power in the seventh sacred cultivators world. The two sects were the Gia sect and the Gui Yuan sect. The strength of the two great sects was close, and they kept each other in check. Thus, they managed to maintain peace for nearly 10,000 years. In the past 1,000 years, the strength of the Gia sect had already surpassed that of the Gui Yuan sect, and it had the momentum of unifying the seven cultivators. At this critical moment, the former overlord, the Feng Tian Fate School, actually came to the Feng Tian selection. This clearly triggered the tension in the Gia sect. Therefore, it was not surprising that the people from the Gia sect appeared at this time and wanted to disrupt the Feng Tian selection. At this moment, in addition to the cultivators from the Feng Tian Fate School and the Gia sect, there were also many other cultivators and young cultivators who came to sign up for the Feng Tian selection. If the Feng Tian Fate School was defeated again and again by the provocation of the Gia sect, one could imagine what would happen in the Feng Tian selection. Nye Tian, the people from the Gia sect, are clearly looking for trouble. The corner of Tang 13's mouth twitched as she whispered, "If the Feng Tian Fate School can't even deal with this ghastly clown, will there still be people signing up for the Feng Tian selection? This guy called Su Tu is not very strong. The Gia sect disciples over there are the real threat." Nye Tian's eyes were gloomy as he looked at the ghastly clown cultivators not far away. Tang 13 nodded and couldn't help but laugh. That one Luan is probably observing the situation and won't dare to act rashly. Although Su Tu was strong, he was still far from Wen Luan. Even Lan Qing and Lan Che, who were by Wen Luan's side, were not weaker than Su Tu's day. Only yes, Su Tu was obviously the vanguard of the Gia sect. The real powerhouses of the Gia sect had not made their move yet. Nye Tian also sensed that there were several powerful auras hidden beside the Gia sect disciples. They were obviously the previous generation of Gia sect and were the real threat. In fact, there were also a few powerful auras from the Fengtian Fate School, but they didn't show themselves. After all, this was a battle between the third-generation disciples. If the older generation cultivators interfered, they would only be laughed at. It might even cause a war between the Fengtian Fate School and the Gia sect. I heard that your Trash Life sect's third-generation chief disciple, Wenluan, is not bad. He's a genius and very strong. Su Tu became even more arrogant when he saw no response. He called out Wenluan and shouted, "Wenluan, if you're here, come up and fight me. Don't be a coward." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was filled with righteous indignation. This guy is too arrogant. He actually asked eldest senior brother to accept the challenge. He's not even in the top 100 of the Gia sect, yet he wants to fight our first senior brother. This is clearly an insult to our Fengtian Fate sect. Although this guy is strong, he's still far from being comparable to eldest senior brother. Wenluan's expression didn't change, and he didn't even react. Given the current situation, should he accept the challenge? With his identity as the head disciple, even if he defeated Su Tu, it was nothing. And once he accepted the challenge, he would have to face the following Gia sect disciples. He was the chief disciple, the final trump card of the Fengtian Fate sect, so he couldn't be rashly sent out. "You bastard, you're not qualified for our young noble to fight." At this moment, a purple-clothed figure soared into the sky, and a clear voice resounded through the clouds. "Let this young lady fight you!" Nye Yin shouted. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He saw that the figure in purple was Wenluan's maid, but he didn't know if it was Lan Qing or Lan Che. "It's Wenluan's maid!" The Fengtian Fate sect's disciples exclaimed in unison. They all recognized that the girl in purple was Wenluan's maid. Wenluan's maid had always been by his side. Since the maid was here, it meant that Wenluan was here as well. Humph! Su Tu looked at the purple-clothed girl in front of him and was startled at first. Then, he laughed evilly and said, "Wenluan, oh Wenluan, you don't dare to fight me, but you let a little girl stand up for you. It seems like you, the lead disciple, are truly a coward." Wenluan's gaze darkened. His stern face had a hint of anger. "Don't worry, young noble. Sister will definitely win." Lan Che smiled faintly. He was very confident in his sister, Lan Qing. But Wenluan's expression was gloomy, unable to hide his worry. He felt a strange aura from Su Tu, as if it was some kind of terrifying curse. Baidu Search 881 Chinese Net. No advertising words. Chapter 4386. Omega 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 choking with sobs. Novel Wenluan looked at Lan Qing in the sky, unable to conceal the worry in his expression. Blue He was well aware of Qing's strength, but Su Tu was not someone easy to deal with. Straight up until now, Su Tu had easily defeated nearly 50 disciples from the Fengtian Fate sect without even revealing his true strength. Wenluan could sense a strange incantation aura on Su Tu's body. It was very hidden and seemed to have fused with his bloodline. He was worried that the curse mark in Su Tu's body was his true trump card. Su Tu's provocation infuriated the Heaven Beacon sect. Wenluan was the prime disciple. His status in the sect was not any lower than an elder. However, Su Tu called him a coward. This was an insult to the sect. This guy is really good at enduring. Nye Tian's eyes were slightly gloomy as he deliberately glanced at Wenluan. The latter's calmness surprised him. "Die, madman!" At this moment, Lan Qing shouted in the sky. She moved and turned into a sword shadow that attacked Su Tuesday Otten Lan Qing's and Lan Che's eyes. Young Master Wenluan was the most important person in the world. They would never allow anyone to insult him. "Good move." Su Tu sneered. His figure moved, and his palm pressed down, easily breaking Lan Qing's attack. Blue Qing's moves were swift and fierce. Before he could stabilize himself, the second sword had already descended. Suddenly, sword energy surged in the air. A sword shadow whizzed through the air with the momentum of a mountain and pressed down on Su Tuesday. Su Tu wasn't afraid of the sword pressure at all. The corner of his lips twitched as he punched. Instantly, a crimson fist shadow pounced out like a ferocious beast. Bang! In the next instant, the sky rumbled, and the heavens and the earth trembled. Violent waves surged in all directions. Blue Qing's figure retreated several hundred meters, and after she stabilized herself, her pretty face flushed red. She felt a surge of blood in her body, and she was on the verge of losing control. Anti-Su Tu, on the other hand, was standing firmly on the mountain, not moving at all. Humph! Su Tu's gaze was cold as he stared at Lan Qing and sneered. You are Wenluan's maid, but your strength is a mess. Your master Wenluan is also someone with an undeserved reputation. You! Lan Qing's face turned even redder as she growled. You are not allowed to insult young master. However, as soon as she finished speaking, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face did not look any better. When the crowd below saw this, they were shocked. How could this Su Tu guy be so powerful? He clearly didn't have such strength just now. Looks like he was hiding his true strength just now. Now that he's fighting Lady Lan Qing, he's finally revealing his true strength. Oh my God! Su Tu is only a disciple ranked outside the top 100 in Gia sect. How terrifying would the true genius disciple of Gia sect be? As the crowd spoke, they looked at Su Tu with even more horror. Oh no! Wenluan's heart sank, and a trace of hesitation appeared on his calm face. He sensed that Su Tu had used the curse power in his bloodline, and Lan Qing seemed to have been hit by Su Tu's curse. I'll go help sister. At this moment, Lan Che couldn't hold it in anymore. Her eyes quivered as she wanted to go help. However, she was stopped by Wenluan. The latter's face was dark as he shook his head slightly. Lan Che was a little anxious, afraid that something would happen to her sister. However, Wenluan signaled her to calm down and not act rashly. Lan Qing and Lan Che were twins and they usually fought together. For example, when they fought against Tang 13 earlier. But the battle right now was a fair one-on-one fight. It was also related to the Feng Tian sect's reputation. If Lan Qing and Lan Che fought one-on-one, people would say that they were bullying with numbers. Even if they won, they wouldn't be able to save the Feng Tian sect's reputation. Wenluan didn't expect Lan Qing to win against Su Tuesday. He only hoped that she would be fine. On the other side, Nie Tian and Tang 13's expressions changed as well. I can't believe this guy was hiding his true strength. Tang 13's eyes darkened. It seems like this Gia sect is not simple. He should be using a type of curse power, and this curse power has fused with his bloodline, almost becoming part of his bloodline power. Nie Tian nodded, but this curse power is not simple. It's hard to control, so he doesn't dare to use it. If this little girl can't handle it, why don't I go fight this Su Tu? Tang 13's lips curled up into a strange smile as she spoke. Let Wenluan do it. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He didn't want Tang 13 to do it. For one, the seed of the spring inside Tang 13's body was a hidden danger. If she fights, it may trigger the seed of the spring. Before, when Tang 13 fought against Lan Qing and Lan Che, it was purely for fun. But if she fights against Su Tu, then it would be a real fight. Perhaps it could even be a fight to the death. For one, this was a battle between the Feng Tian sect, and Tang 13 belonged to the Feng Tian sect. It wouldn't be appropriate for her to fight. You are no opponent of mine. Let Wenluan come out. Up in the sky, Su Tu had gained the upper hand. He was arrogant and shouted. Maniac, I haven't lost yet. Lan Qing was very persistent. Even though she was wounded, she didn't want to give up. Her long sword pierced through the sky and the shadow of a sword appeared. It drew a bright line in the sky, full of killer's intent. Su Tu frowned. Tu frowned and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He slapped out with his palm, directly shattering the sword's shadow. Then, his figure moved and he grabbed out with his palm. Suddenly, the void sank and a terrifying ghost claw shadow appeared, directly grabbing at Lan Qing. Lan Qing's eyes quivered. She felt the air around her stagnate, as if she was being imprisoned by a terrifying force. She felt the danger and wanted to retreat. However, she found out that her body was locked down by a giant force and she couldn't move. Watch out! Seeing this, everyone below screamed. Su Tu's claw was no small matter. Once it lands, even if Lan Qing doesn't die, she will be heavily injured. Sister! Lan Che's pupils dilated. He shouted and moved. Wenluan's eyes darkened. It was obvious that he couldn't hold back anymore. But just then, a powerful shadow of a blade fell from the sky. Like a waterfall of blades, it crushed the ghost claw into pieces. Sway then, a figure in black landed in front of Lan Qing and blocked her. He Han! Lan Qing was still in shock. She saw the figure in front of her and shouted his name. He Han! Almost at the same time, the crowd below also exclaimed. Their eyes shone with excitement. The warrior in black was none other than the third-generation disciple of the Fengtian sect, Black Blade He Han. Feng. The third-generation disciples of the Fengtian sect consisted of the sword, saber, and spear heroes. They were Mysterious Sword Wenluan, Black Blade He Han, and Cloud Spear Qin Zhong. Mysterious Sword, Black Blade, and Cloud Spear. The three of them were famous and they were the geniuses of the third-generation disciples. Black Blade He Han's reputation was second only to Wenluan's. His cold iron black blade was domineering and unsharpened. Baidu Search 881 Chinese Network Yen. No advertisement. Chapter 4387. He Han. Wenluan saw the person in the air and his gaze dimmed, his expression calming down. Black Blade He Han's strength was something that Wenluan knew better than anyone else in the entire Fengtian Fate sect. Feng Heaven's three heroes, Profound Sword Wenluan, Black Blade He Han, Cloud Spear Qin Zhong. Since the three were called the same, there was naturally competition between them. Light Wenluan and He Han had fought at least 70 to 80 times, if not 100. Even though the two did not fight to the death each time, but their strength was still clearly shown. In so many battles, Wenluan won more than he lost, and every time he fought, he held back. But Wenluan thought that he was only slightly stronger than He Han. Like if it was a true life and death battle, the outcome was unknown. He Han's appearance solved Wenluan's problem. Like if He Han wasn't there, then the person standing opposite Su Tu would be Wenluan. But Wenluan, as the head disciple, did not want to show himself too early. Wenluan knew that after Su Tu's provocation and Lan Qing's attack, the Fengtian Fate sect disciples would be puzzled by him avoiding the battle, and might even be dissatisfied with him. But he did not care, he knew where he was being blamed. Even if he was misunderstood, he had no complaints. Everyone when they saw He Han appear, their originally gloomy expressions quickly became excited. He Han is here, that's great. Senior brother He Han is on the same level as first senior brother Wenluan. I heard that the two often spar, and He Han has never been at a disadvantage. I feel that senior brother He Han is not weaker than first senior brother Wenluan. At least now, senior brother He Han dares to show himself, unlike first senior brother who avoided the battle and shamed the sect. First senior brother might have his own plans. Let's see if he can beat this arrogant guy first. The Fengtian Fate sect disciples discussed, as expected, they were already criticizing Wenluan. Wenluan was hidden in the crowd, everyone's words lingered in his ears, but it did not affect his emotions. He had his own determination. His true opponent was the Gia sect disciple who had yet to fight. Finally, there's someone who looks passable. Up in the sky, Su Tu glanced at He Han with a cold smirk. I heard that the Fengtian Fate School has the three heroes of sword, saber, and spear, profound sword, dark saber, and cloud spear. Looks like your black saber, he-han of the three heroes. Since you've heard of my name, that saves me a lot of trouble. Otherwise, when you lose, you won't know who defeated you. He-han was dressed in black. His eyes were cold and his facial features were rough. He looked very fierce. Waving his hand, he signaled for Lan Qing to leave. His power is a little strange. Be careful. Lan Qing's eyes darkened. After saying that, she moved and retreated to one side. Humph. Su Tu looked at He-han and sneered. I didn't expect Black Saber He-han to have such a sharp tongue. May your knife be sharper than your tongue. Come on. He-han no longer spoke any nonsense. With a wave of his hand, a heavy black saber appeared in his hand. It was his spirit weapon, the dark saber Cold Edge. The moment the Cold Edge appeared, the surrounding space was instantly enveloped by a terrifying saber aura. It was filled with killing intent and chilling to the bone. Su too felt the coldness assaulting his face. His gaze darkened and his heart trembled. He didn't expect He-han's strength to be so terrifying. Just the saber aura alone was already too much for him to handle. The three heroes of heaven lived up to their name. Next, feeling the heavy pressure of the saber, Fang Ren's expression changed and he was shocked. I've heard that senior brother He-han's dark saber Cold Edge is very powerful. I didn't expect senior brother He-han to have cultivated the Cold Edge Qi to such a level. Senior brother He-han's saber essence is so strong. I'm afraid his strength has surpassed first senior brother Wenlun. With such saber essence, Su Tu probably won't be able to withstand even one strike from senior brother He-han. Everyone's expression trembled with excitement. They admired He-han's strength. Wenlun's gaze trembled and he couldn't help but smile. He thought, He-han, I didn't expect your saber essence to improve in such a short time. Looks like I have to work even harder. Otherwise, I won't be able to protect my senior brother. The strength of the cold saber intent made Wenlun feel pressured. But at this time, he was very happy, without the slightest bit of jealousy. He-han was indeed very strong, but he, Wenlun, was no mediocre person either. Wenlun still had the confidence to suppress He-han. More importantly, He-han's strength would make the Gia sect feel pressured. They would know that the Fengtian Fate School was still powerful. I'll grant you defeat with one strike. At this moment, He-han's low voice resounded from high above in the sky, and it was extremely oppressive. Descend in an instant, his figure moved. Boom! The dark saber, Cold Edge, slashed through the air. Instantly, saber chi erupted. The surging intent was like a torrential river, majestic and powerful, suppressing the heavens and earth. A gigantic saber shadow appeared with a majestic aura, suppressing everything. Su Tu immediately felt the pressure of the vast expanse. His pupils constricted, and a gloomy look appeared in his eyes. He stepped forward. His body shook and a strange energy circulated inside him. Instantly, the curses of his bloodline crazily surged, transforming into a powerful force that erupted and condensed on his palms. Bang! Su Tu immediately condensed the curses and slammed his palm forward. The palm was so powerful that heaven and earth sank. Space seemed like it was about to collapse. Bang! Then, in the sky, the shadow of the saber and the shadow of the palm clashed together. A loud rumble shook the surroundings. The majestic energy turned into endless waves that ravaged the sky. In an instant, He-han's body sank and he couldn't help but take a step back. But then, he stabilized himself like a mountain. On the other side, Su Tu could not withstand the terrifying impact. His body was flung out for hundreds of meters. Before he could stabilize himself, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Though Su Tu had used the power of the curses in his body at the last moment, he was too weak compared to He-han. He could not fight back at all. Good. Seeing the scene in the sky, everyone's eyes trembled violently, and then they all cheered. Dark Saber He-han didn't disappoint. He defeated Su Tu with one slash. But Wenluan frowned. His eyes were gloomy and his face didn't look good. He seemed to be worried about something. Dark Saber He Han, you are indeed one of the 3 heroes of Sky Beacon. Su Tu stabilized himself and took a deep breath. Enduring the pain, he said in a low voice, I, Su Tu, have lost this battle. Then, his eyes flashed with coldness. Then, his body moved and he landed. He Han's eyes were gloomy. His hand holding the dark saber, cold edge, was trembling. Although he looked calm and steady in that exchange just now, he was actually injured. He didn't think that Su Tu's curses would be so strange. In an instant, they passed through his saber intent and invaded his body. Chapter 4388. Omega 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 Omega, choking with sobs. Novel. In that instant, He Han had already sensed that something was wrong, but it was already too late by the time she wanted to react. Su, the curse power that Tu had unleashed was like maggots in the bones, directly invading his body. At that moment, He Han sensed that the power of the curse was moving through his body, causing his blood to roil slightly. Although he could completely suppress the power of the seal with his saber intent, it would be difficult to control the power of the seal if he were to fight again. Oh no, he has been cursed. Tang 13 realized something was wrong. Her face darkened and she screamed internally. Although it was only for a moment, Tang 13 still sensed the invasion of the curse mark. He Han's saber intent was very strong, but the power of the incantation could instantly penetrate the saber intent, which showed how strange and terrifying it was. But He Han continued to stand coldly in the sky. Saber intent surged around him. Clearly, he had no intention of backing down. It seems like the Feng Tian Fate School has a few talents, then let me experience your dark saber. At this moment, a low voice rang out. After which, a silhouette dashed up into the sky with a strange speed, appearing in front of He Han. Everyone's eyes trembled violently. Only now did they see that person's figure clearly. They couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. This guy is so fast. I didn't even see him clearly just now. With such a fast speed, it looks like he's another troublesome fellow. Will senior brother He Han be all right? Senior brother He Han is powerful. He defeated Su Tu with one slash just now. Even if this person's body technique is strange, he is definitely not senior brother He Han's opponent. The disciple from the Destiny sect said. He was very confident in He Han. After all, He Han was someone who was as famous as the head disciple Wenluan. Looking at your movement technique, you should be from the Wind Demons clan, right? He Han looked at the person in front of her and asked in a deep voice. Black Blade He Han, you are indeed knowledgeable. That person's eyes flashed with a cold light as he said indifferently, I am Feng Li, and I am from the Wind Demons clan. Han frowned slightly. Although he had already guessed the other party's background, he still couldn't help but be shocked when he actually confirmed it. Wind the Ghost clan was quite famous not only in the 7th cultivator of true virtue sacred world, but also in the sacred heavens world. At very long ago, the Wind Demons clan was once an extremely large clan in the Saints' world. Through the dance of 8 winds passed down from their ancestors, the Wind Demons clan became one of the 10 great clans. No, this was the glory of the ancestors of the Wind Demons clan. The current Wind Ghost clan had long lost its previous reputation. Rumor had it that the decline of the Wind Demons clan was due to their ancestral 8-wind ghost dance. The Wind Ghost dance was a great desolate martial art passed down from the ancient era. It required an extremely special bloodline power to practice. However, at some point in time, the bloodline of the Wind Demons clan became weaker and weaker, causing the number of people in the clan who could practice the 8-wind demon dance to become fewer and fewer. As a result, the reputation of the Wind Demons clan became lower and lower, and in the end, they were reduced to an unknown small clan in the 7th sacred cultivator world. In the recent thousands of years, the Wind Demons clan had the momentum to rise again. Listen, it was said that the Wind Demon's clan had found the reason for the weakening of their bloodline. As a result, the number of people who could practice the 8 Wind Demon dance increased, and the number of experts in the clan slowly increased. Moreover, a few years ago, a genius with a peerless bloodline called Feng Kuan appeared in the Wind Demon's clan. His bloodline power was so strong that he could practice the complete 8 Wind Demon dance. Last year, He Han went out to train and fought with Feng Kuan. They were equally matched. At that time, Feng Kuan had just started practicing the 8 Wind Demon dance and only knew the first move of the 8 Wind Demon dance. Just the first move of the Ghost Dance was already very difficult for He Han. The current Feng Kuan was already an outstanding talent among the third-generation disciples of the Gia sect. Among the third-generation disciples of the Gia sect, he could definitely be ranked in the top 3. He Han estimated that Feng Kuan should have already mastered the complete 8 Wind Demon dance. If they were to meet again, he would most likely lose. Fortunately, the person in front of him was not Feng Kuan, but Feng Li. 99 didn't know how many moves of the 8 Wind Demon dance Feng Li had mastered. Speaking of which, Feng Li's aura, eyes, and movement technique were somewhat similar to Feng Kuan's. 9 wondered if the two of them were related. When the crowd heard about the Wind Demon's clan, they were puzzled. They had never heard of this clan before. Oh no, it's actually someone from the Wind Demon's clan. However, Wen Luan's expression changed. His eyes trembled slightly and he seemed a little nervous. He knew much more about the Wind Demon's clan than He Han did. This was because the One clan and the Wind Demon's clan had a very good relationship. Wen Luan's sister, Wen Ruo, was engaged to the number 1 genius of the Wind Demon's clan, Feng Kuan. Wen Luan had once fought with no less than 10 warriors of the Wind Demon's clan, so he knew how terrifying the 8 Wind Demon dance was. Wen Luan was also very familiar with Feng Li, who was high up in the sky. He was Feng Kuan's younger brother, the bloodline genius of the Wind Demon's clan, second only to Feng Kuan. Although Wen Luan had never fought with Feng Li, he knew that Feng Li's strength was definitely not to be underestimated. The 8 Wind Demon dance had a total of 9 moves. With He Han's current strength, he could at most resist the first 3 moves. Wen Luan could only pray that Feng Li had mastered the first 3 moves of the 8 Wind Demon dance. 9 come. High up in the sky, He Han shouted. He was not afraid to fight and said in a deep voice, "Let me see how strong your 8 Wind Demon dance is. I will defeat you in 1 move." Feng Li's eyes were as deep as the abyss. The moment he spoke coldly, his aura suddenly changed. A frightening black aura spread out and turned into a ripple that spread rapidly. Arrogant! He Han immediately felt a chill coming towards him. He roared angrily, but he didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. The cold edge of the dark saber struck out again, and the saber essence surged and condensed into a saber essence vortex outside his body. It was like a shield, and it enveloped him. Wen Luan had fought with Feng Kuan before. He knew that the greatest characteristic of the 8 Wind Demon dance was that it was extremely fast. Wen Luan, in a situation where he could not determine from which direction Feng Li would attack, protecting himself was the safest method. 8 Wind Demon dance, cicada cries in the night. At that moment, Feng Li's figure moved. With a deep voice, his figure turned into a black ray of light and disappeared into thin air. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but gasp in unison and feel that it was unbelievable. They obviously knew that Feng Li did not really disappear. It was just that his speed was too fast for them to see. Oh no! When Feng Li uttered the words, "cicada cries in the night," Wen Luan's expression changed. His eyes narrowed as he exclaimed. Cicada cries in the night was the 4th move of the 8 Wind Demon dance. Wen Luan did not expect Feng Li to have mastered the 4th move at such a young age. Doesn't this mean that Feng Li's talent is catching up to Feng Kuan's from a few years ago? Before Wen Luan could finish his sentence, a cry of agony came from high up in the sky. A crimson ray flashed by and the saber vortex in the sky came to a stop. 9mox Wen Luan Han's figure appeared. There was a fist-sized hole on his chest. His body trembled and he could barely stand. 9 Search IX Chinese Net. No advertising message. Chapter 4389. High up in the sky, dark saber He Han stood bathed in blood. His body shook ceaselessly like a broken leaf in a storm that could be torn into pieces at any moment. The crowd below was dead silent. Several pairs of eyes stared at He Han, their eyes filled with disbelief. The great black blade He Han, an existence on the same level as Wen Luan in the Feng Tian Fate sect, was defeated in one move by Feng Li. The crowd could not believe what they were seeing. He Han was clearly very strong, so how could he be defeated by Feng Li in one move? He Han was one of the Sky Beacon heroes, a genius of the Sky Beacon sect. And where was Feng Li? He was not famous in Gia sect at all. But even so, Feng Li defeated He Han in one move. Was there really such a huge gap between the Gia sect and the Feng Tian Fate sect? Wen Luan stood where he was and regained his composure, but there was still shock in his eyes. Actually, when Feng Li mentioned Cold Cicada Night Cry, he already knew that He Han was going to lose. Only however, when this scene really happened, he was still very shocked. Feng Li's strength had far exceeded his expectations. It was too terrifying. At this moment, he could not help but ask himself, Feng Li defeated He Han in one move, how many moves could he last? The other outside, Nie Tian and Tang 13's expressions changed as well. Tang 13's eyes flickered and shock was written all over her face. When Feng Li appeared, he already had a premonition that He Han would lose, but he never imagined that He Han would lose so easily. His 8-wind ghost dance is very strong. Nie Tian's face was gloomy as he stared coldly at Feng Li for a long time. Just like that, the Cold Cicada's night cry just now was enough to show how terrifying the spectral dance of the 8 Gale was. That kind of flawless attack was unavoidable. Actually, in terms of true strength, He Han was not much weaker than Feng Li. In fact, she might even be stronger than the latter. However, He Han did not understand the 8 Gale ghostly dance at all. She had adopted a defensive stance right from the start, which was already a sign of weakness. The best way to deal with an unavoidable attack like Winter Cicada's night cry was to take the initiative. And He Han had chosen the worst way to deal with it, so she lost completely. If He Han and Feng Li were to fight head-on, the outcome of the battle would be unknown. No, however, it was too late to say that. He Han had already lost, and she had lost miserably. After witnessing He Han's crushing defeat, the disciples of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect were terrified and speechless. The Sky Beacon 3 heroes are a mess. High up in the sky, Feng Li spoke coldly. He glanced at He Han with disdain and didn't want to take another look. He Han was already heavily injured. Now that he was agitated, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as paper. Feng Li didn't even look at him. He stood coldly in the sky and said arrogantly, Wen Luan, are you still not going to make a move? As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd below burst into an uproar. Who was this guy? How could he be so strong? This person is so arrogant. Why hasn't eldest senior brother made a move yet? How long are you going to endure? Make a move? I think we should forget about it. Even if our eldest senior brother is stronger than senior brother He Han, it's only by a little. Didn't you see that fellow called Feng Li defeated senior brother He Han in one move? Even eldest senior brother wouldn't last more than 2 moves against him. The fear in the crowd's eyes deepened. Feng Li was too terrifying. With just one move, he crushed the last hope of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect. Wen Luan listened to the crowd's words. His eyes trembled and his fists clenched tighter. But was he really going to make a move? The crowd was right. He, Wenlun, was only slightly stronger than He Han. Even if he made a move, could he really defeat Fengli? If Wenlun didn't make a move, the Beacon Heaven Fate sect would at least retain a shred of dignity. If he lost, then this last shred of dignity would be gone. A man is upright, why should he be afraid of a fight? Right when Wenlun was hesitating and indeterminately, a low and deep voice suddenly resounded in his mind, and it caused him to be suddenly shocked. He raised his head and saw a silver-haired youth standing in front of him. It was Nye Tian whom he met not long ago. You! Wenlun stared at Nye Tian, not knowing what to say. Feng Li's strength isn't that strong. He only relies on the 8-gale ghostly dance. Nye Tian didn't turn his head around. Instead, he transmitted his voice. The 8-gale ghostly dance is not a terrifying technique. As long as you are confident you can defeat him. Really? Wenlun's eyes burned with passion, but he was still hesitant. Wenlun, you are the head disciple of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect. If even you are scared, then what will the other disciples of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect do? Nye Tian lowered his voice and said in a cold tone, "A man is upright, he should not be afraid of anyone. Mr. Nye is right, Wenlun understands." Wenlun's aura shook as if he was enlightened. He was the head disciple. He could fight or lose, but he must not be scared. As long as you defeat Fengli, I will take care of the rest of the challenges from the Gia sect. Nye Tian nodded his head and said in a serious tone, "Thank you, Mr. Nye." Wenlun's eyes widened as he expressed his gratitude and soared into the sky with a kick. There was another reason why he was hesitant. Even if he defeated Fengli, what would happen to the rest of the challengers from the Gia sect? Now since Nye Tian had said that he would take care of the remaining challengers, he had nothing to worry about and could fight with ease. First senior brother. The sudden appearance of Wenlun caused the crowd to exclaim. Their eyes that were filled with despair suddenly flickered with a strange glow. Even though they were doubtful of Wenlun's strength, his appearance still made the crowd excited. Wenlun, you're finally here. He Han's body trembled as she forced a smile while looking at Wenlun. I'm sorry I'm late. Wenlun supported He Han and channeled a stream of energy into her body as he said apologetically. As long as you can defeat him, it won't be too late. He Han took a deep breath as her expression became better. I will try my best. Wenlun nodded and signaled He Han to step down. I didn't think you would actually accept the challenge. Fengli stared at Wenlun with eyes as cold as the abyss and sneered. As the first disciple of the Feng Tian Fate sect, I swear to protect the dignity of the Feng Tian Fate sect. Wenlun took one step forward as a surge of intent soared into the sky. Humph! Fengli sneered and arrogantly said, Wenlun, you are a member of the Wen clan. Your sister Wenruo might become my sister-in-law, so I won't let you lose too badly. Fengli, the outcome of our battle is still unknown. Don't be too arrogant. Wenlun's eyes darkened as a black heavy sword appeared in his hand and he said, I know your Wind Demons clan's 8 ghostly wind dance is terrifying, but my Wen clan's 4 senses 4 calamities sword is not to be trifled with. Chapter 4390. Up in the sky, 2 figures faced each other, causing the wind and lightning to howl. The crowd below looked at the 2 figures with trembling eyes. Do you guys think eldest senior brother is this guy's match? Why do I have a bad feeling about this? Senior brother He Han might be as famous as eldest senior brother, but his strength should be weaker than eldest senior brother. However, he was defeated by Fengli in one move. This means that Fengli is much stronger than He Han. Eldest senior brother doesn't have a high chance of winning. Fengli is a nobody in the Ghost Cliff sect. If even first senior brother is no match for him, then who else can our Feng Tian Fate sect rely on? Fengli said. The Heaven Fate sect's disciples discussed in a low voice. Although they hoped that Wenlun would win, logic told them that Wenlun had no chance of winning. On the other side, a few masked cultivators stared at Wenlun and Fengli. I didn't expect Feng Li to be this strong. Looks like we came for nothing. Senior brother Su is right. If we knew Feng Li was this strong, we wouldn't have come. Looks like the so-called Sky Beacon 3 Heroes is just an empty title. The Sky Beacon sect still wants to hold the Sky Beacon selection with this kind of strength? They're just asking to be humiliated. These cultivators were disciples of the Gia sect. Moreover, they were the top 10 among the third-generation disciples of the Gia sect. One of them was even ranked in the top 3 among the third-generation disciples of the Gia sect. The reason why they were here was to ensure that they won't fail in this challenge against the Sky Beacon sect. The Gia sect had been gaining momentum in recent years. It seemed like they were going to unify the 7 sacred cultivators' world. They would not allow any sect to stop them at this time. Make your move. In the sky, Wenluan's sword was hanging upside down. Suddenly, sword energy filled the air and spread out like a dense fog, instantly enveloping an area of several 10,000 meters. Barrier! Feng Li immediately felt his entire body being enveloped by a powerful sword's will. He couldn't help but frown, but he didn't care. He smiled coldly. So this is the 4 senses of the One clan. That's all there is to it. The One family was a family of swordsmen. All the disciples of the family cultivated a set of sword techniques passed down by their ancestors, the 4 senses 4 calamities sword. A long time ago, someone from the One clan had relied on the 4 senses 4 tribulations sword to become a peak swordsman in the 7th sacred cultivator world. However, the 4 senses 4 tribulations sword was different from ordinary sword technique. Not only did it have high requirements for a warrior's talent in the sword Dao, but it also required a warrior to have a powerful martial Dao fate. This was because the 4 senses 4 tribulations sword could only explode with great power when combined with the power of fate. The One clan and the Wind Demon's clan were old friends, so Feng Li was no stranger to the 4 senses 4 calamities sword. Feng Li had seen with his own eyes that the elders of the One clan used the 4 disasters sword of 4 senses to fight. However, at that time, his cultivation was too weak, and he could not see through the mystery of the 4 disasters sword of 4 senses. Hiruntu at that time, when he personally experienced the 4 senses of the 4 tribulations sword, Feng Li felt that the legendary 4 tribulations of the 4 senses was just SOSO. Arrogant! Wenluan bellowed. His profound sword swept out and his sword intent exploded. Instantly, waves of incomparably powerful energy overflowed the sky. Combined with the unique spirit formation runes of the 4 senses realm, it actually linked up into one, surging and mighty, and directly pressed down on Feng Li. Feng Li's eyes darkened slightly. With a light tap of his foot, his figure retreated several hundred meters. Then, his figure actually changed. His entire body seemed to become as soft as water, and he stepped in the air in a strange dance. At this moment, a thin layer of mist condensed around his body, flowing ceaselessly. The mist barrier looked sloppy and ordinary, but it easily blocked the monstrous waves that were coming towards it. Wenluan, are these your 4 senses and 4 tribulations? Feng Li easily neutralized Wenluan's powerful attack. He could not help but sneer. If you only have this kind of strength, then you are too disappointing. Wenluan's eyes were cold and gloomy, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he forced himself to remain calm. He knowing how terrifying the ghost dance of 8 winds was, Feng Li took the initiative to attack first. He wanted to seize the initiative and suppress Feng Li. But he did not think that the ghost dance of 8 winds could release such power in the 4 senses realm, allowing Feng Li to easily deal with it. Next the crowd looked at the boundless sword mist in the sky. They could not see Wenluan and Feng Li's figures at all. They were very anxious. The 4 senses realm could isolate the outside world's senses. At this moment, only a few people with special senses could see the battle in the 4 senses realm. Nya the demonic eye opened and his gaze darkened. He could not help but feel nervous. This battle was very important to Wenluan, but it was even more important to the Feng Tian Fate sect. So, Nye Tian did not wish for Wenluan to lose. If Wenluan lost, not only would it be a heavy blow to him, but it would also affect the Feng Tian Fate sect's prestige. Try thinking about it. If the chief disciple of a sect could not even defeat a second-rate disciple, was there still a need to join such a sect? Noni Tian had already prepared for the worst. If Wenluan lost, he would accept the Gia sect's challenge as a disciple of the Feng Tian Fate sect. He was the beacon emperor of the Feng Tian Fate sect, but with his age, he could only be considered as a third-generation disciple. But with his strength and realm, it was very suitable for him to accept the Gia sect's challenge. After awakening his 10 life veins, Nye Tian had not had a real fight yet. This was a good opportunity. In the blink of an eye, Wenluan and Feng Li had already exchanged tens of moves. Within these 10 moves, although Wenluan had been attacking and had the upper hand, Nye Tian could see that the situation was becoming more and more disadvantageous for Wenluan. Feng Li had been on the defensive, obviously waiting for a chance to kill in one strike. Nye Tian, don't be too nervous. This Wenluan kid is not an idiot. He has been attacking fiercely because he is looking for a chance. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded. She chuckled and said, "From my observation, these two are about to have a winner. The last move will depend on who has a better grasp of the timing." Nye Tian's eyes dimmed and nodded. At this moment, in the four senses realm, Wenluan's figure suddenly paused in the air and then hovered in the air like a sharp sword. Good chance. Seeing this, Feng Li's pupils shrank slightly. He shouted in excitement and moved his body, turning into a black ray of light that whistled like the wind. Four senses are silent, and the heart is as still as water. Wenluan directly closed his eyes in the face of Feng Li's sudden attack. It was as if he had entered into another state. "You're courting death." Feng Li was extremely fast. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he said in a deep voice, "Eight-gale ghostly dance, death of the sandfly." The death of the sandfly was the fifth form of the eight-gale ghostly dance, a killing move that was even stronger than the night cry of the cicada. Wenluan stood there quietly, not moving at all, as steady as an old tree. In an instant, a black ray swept past. Wenluan's body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, Wenluan's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. The corner of his mouth twitched as he chanted, "Four calamities, silence of the heavens and earth, silent e'en calamity." Chapter 4391. In the realm of four senses, Wenluan's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened. As the words of the four tribulations fell, the profound sword moved by itself and transformed into a swift and fierce sword shadow in the air. It suddenly rushed out and pressed towards Feng Li. Feng Li, who was in midair, suddenly felt the cold killing intent. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Heaven and earth were silent, and the Een tribulation was silent. The sword of four calamities pierced through the air like a shadow of a sharp blade, pressing towards Feng Li's face. Feng Li's pupils constricted. For the first time, he felt death approaching. Such as once this sharp sword fell, Feng Li's fate would only be one word: death. Buzz! However, just as the sword was about to descend, it suddenly paused in the air. Then, it let out an ear-piercing hum as it hovered in the air, stopping less than a finger away from Feng Li's forehead. Feng Li's entire body was drenched in cold sweat. He felt a chill run down his spine. And on his forehead there was actually a finger-deep wound. Blood and cold sweat dripped down together, making him look extremely miserable. This even though Feng Li had withdrawn his sword at the crucial moment, it was still so powerful. It was clear that if he had not withdrawn his sword, Feng Li would have died without a doubt. Windly Dong swallowed a mouthful of saliva, calmed down a little, looked up at Wenluan not far away, and looked moved. At this moment, Wenluan's body was swaying, and he was on the verge of collapsing. It was already a miracle that he was still able to hold on to his last breath after taking the direct hit from the dancing ghosts of 8 Gale's sandfly attack. Lucky fortunately, Wen Luan was in the state of 4 senses, and the spirit power in the air had greatly weakened the might of the annihilation of the windfly. Otherwise, Wen Luan would already be a corpse. Same at this moment, the crowd below looked up at the 2 people high up in the sky. Their expressions were shocked and sluggish, and they only reacted after a long time. Is the battle over? So, who won? From the looks of it, both of them are injured. However, eldest senior brother Wen Luan's injuries seem to be more severe. Could it be that even eldest senior brother is no match for this guy? The people from the Destiny sect didn't see the process of the battle. They only saw the final scene, so they didn't know who won the battle. But Nye Tian and Tang 13, on the other hand, saw everything clearly. They were both looking at Wen Luan with mixed feelings. Gangan that instant, Wen Luan had the chance to kill Fengli. However, his heart softened and he stopped at the last moment. Indeed, this was just a competition. There was no need to kill. At this time, Fengli, who was high up in the sky, opened his mouth. His fists were tightly clenched and his eyes were incomparably cold. After staring at Wen Luan for a long time, he finally said, "I lost." "Great, Fengli has lost." As soon as he finished speaking, the people of the Feng Tian Fate sect were stunned at first, but then they began to cry out in joy. Even though they did not see the process of the battle, since Fengli admitted defeat, it was the best result. Wen Luan's eyes darkened, and his taut nerves finally relaxed. Then, his body swayed, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Even though he won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Furthermore, his injuries were far more serious than Fengli's. Fengli frowned and looked at him deeply. Without saying anything, he turned around and landed on the ground. Just like that, as soon as Fengli landed, another figure appeared in the sky in front of Wen Luan. His eyes revealed a playful glint as he said, "First disciple of the Feng Tian Fate School, you truly live up to your reputation. How about I, Su, try fighting you?" Wen Luan's expression darkened as he asked in a deep voice, "You are Su Ku?" It's rare that eldest senior brother still remembers this Su. Su Ku's eyes darkened even more. Dong. The mention of Su Ku's name caused the people of the Feng Tian Fate sect to be shocked. His name is Su Ku, could it be the one that was expelled from the sect? It seems like it is him. I heard that he entered the sect with eldest senior brother Wen Luan. Back then, his talent was on par with eldest senior brother. However, he violated the sect's rules and was expelled by the Lord Sovereign. So this guy joined the Gia sect after leaving the Feng Tian Fate sect. Looking at his attitude, is he planning to take revenge against the sect? Many people couldn't help but worry. Su Ku, it really is you. Wen Luan struggled to hold on. His eyes trembled as he recalled the events of many years ago. Back then, he and Su Ku had entered the Feng Tian Fate sect together and cultivated together. Gradually, they became good friends. But no one had expected that Su Ku would disregard the rules of the sect when she was carrying out a mission for the sect. She had cruelly slaughtered over 10 martial artists, which had angered the sect leader and caused her to be expelled from the sect. It's as a matter of fact, Wen Luan wasn't too clear about what had happened back then. And when Su Ku left, she didn't even say goodbye to him, not even giving him a chance to say goodbye. After that, Wen Luan also tried to find Su Ku's whereabouts, but there was no news. He had never imagined that he would meet Su Ku again in such a situation. Surprised? The corner of Su Ku's mouth twitched as she coldly laughed. I originally thought that I wouldn't have the chance to go up on stage. Who would have thought that your strength is not bad, you actually managed to defeat Fengli. Su Ku, what happened back then? Why did you join the Gia sect? Wen Luan frowned and couldn't help but ask. What happened back then is in the past. Why bring it up again? Su Ku was extremely cold. Now that you and I belong to different sects, We are on opposing sides. As a disciple of the Gia sect, I officially challenge you. Do you accept? Wenluan's face was full of shock, not knowing what to say. But Suku's domineering attitude caused an uproar among the crowd. This traitor, he's so shameless. Eldest senior brother is already injured to this extent. How can he accept the challenge? Traitors only know how to take advantage of others. The sect shouldn't have let him leave, they should have killed him. The crowd argued, but there was nothing they could do. Since the Gia sect had arranged for Suku to fight after Fengli, it was enough to prove that Suku's strength was above Fengli's. After all, you and I are friends. I don't want to kill you with my own hands. You should step down and let someone else fight me. Suku looked at Wenluan and said coldly. Suku, you. Wenluan's expression turned ugly. He could see the hatred in Suku's eyes towards the Fengtian Fate sect. Dong. What happened back then that caused Suku to become like this? I don't want to say anything more. If no one from the Fengtian Fate sect is willing to accept my challenge, then the Fengtian selection will end here. Suku's eyes were cold and domineering. Wenluan's expression turned even uglier. Other than him, who else from the Fengtian Fate sect could accept the challenge? Next, the people from the Fengtian Fate sect also had an ugly expression. The Fengtian Fate sect really had no one else. Let me do it. At this moment, a calm voice was heard. Then, a silver-haired figure soared into the sky and landed next to Wenluan like a sharp sword. Chapter 4392. High up in the sky, the silver-haired figure descended fiercely. His whole body was surging with traces of sword intent, releasing a strange and unpredictable aura. Thesa's silver-haired figure was none other than Nye Tian. Nye Tian. When Wenluan saw Nye Tian appear, although he was already mentally prepared, he was still pleasantly surprised. At the same time, Wenluan was also slightly worried. He wasn't sure if Nye Tian had the strength to handle the upcoming challenges. Senior brother Wen, go and rest. Leave this to me. Nye Tian smiled faintly and patted Wenluan's shoulder. He channeled a stream of saint energy into Wenluan to stabilize his injuries. Yes. Wenluan could feel Nye Tian's calmness. Although he was still worried, he still nodded his head. He looked deeply at Suku and retreated to the side to rest. Nye Tian's sudden appearance caused everyone to be stunned at first, and then they started discussing. Who is this person? How come I've never seen him before? He should be an unknown disciple. Judging from his strength, he doesn't seem to be very strong. Even eldest senior brother was seriously injured and had to retreat. Isn't this silver-haired fellow courting death? This person was very hot-blooded, but unfortunately, he was too impulsive. With his strength, I'm afraid he'll be defeated by Suku in one move. With these words, the disciples of the Wind Heaven Fate sect sighed one after another, feeling deeply worried for Nye Tian. Sir, are you all right? When Wenluan's figure landed, Lan Qing and Lan Che immediately supported him and asked in unison. I'm fine. Wenluan nodded slightly, but his eyes were still fixed on Nye Tian. Clearly, he was still worried. Young master, you have done your best. Lan Qing nodded deeply, comforting Wenluan. However, Wenluan shook his head helplessly. He knew very well what sort of responsibility and hope he shouldered as the chief disciple. He had tried his best but failed. This could only mean that he was not strong enough. Just who was this white-haired fellow? Will he be a match for Suku? Lan Che looked towards Nye Tian. Although his tone was questioning, it was clear that he didn't have much confidence in Nye Tian. He's only at the 9th level of the heavenly tribulation. I'm afraid he's just putting his life on the line. Lan Che sighed helplessly. Wenluan was the head disciple of the Fengtian Fate sect, and was already a first-layer Heaven Awareness Saint Emperor, but he could only barely beat Fengli. Suku's strength was obviously stronger than Fengli's. As long as Nye Tian didn't die in the battle with Suku, it would be a miracle. Don't worry, in Nie Tian's eyes, these people are just a bunch of mobs. However, at that moment a faint chuckle rang out. It was a voice filled with confidence in Nie Tian. Lan Che frowned. Seeing that the person standing next to him was Tang 13, he couldn't help but ask, "Is your friend stronger than you?" Lan Che had never seen Nie Tian in action, but she knew Tang 13's strength very well. In the previous fight, Tang 13 didn't even reveal her true capabilities. She was able to defeat the two sisters easily. She was very strong. If Nie Tian was at the same level as Tang 13, or even stronger, then he might actually be able to fight against Su Ku. Tang 13 chuckled. After thinking for a while, she said, "Let's put it this way. As long as those two old men don't make a move, these people from the Gia sect are all meat to Nie Tian." He had already noticed that other than the young disciples from the Gia sect, there were also two elders. They were obviously the elders of the sect. Lan Qing and Lan Che froze at the same time and couldn't react in time. The corner of Tang 13's lips curled up and she smiled. Lan Qing and Lan Che's eyes widened in shock. They couldn't believe it. Hard was the seemingly ordinary Nie Tian really as strong as Tang 13 said? High in the sky, Nie Tian stood calmly and stared at Su Ku. Su Ku was also looking at Nie Tian. At first, his gaze was full of disdain. But slowly it changed into confusion and surprise. He sensed that Nie Tian's sword intent was different from that of ordinary swordsmen, and he sensed a hint of danger from it. What surprised him even more was that he couldn't tell how many life veins Nie Tian had. Suk used to be a disciple of the Fengtian sect. He was also a natal cultivator with 5 awakened life veins, but he had a special ability that allowed him to easily see the number of vital meridians of other fate chart cultivators, unless the other party had more than 3 vital meridians than him. But right now, he couldn't tell the number of life veins of Nie Tian. Didn't this mean that Nie Tian had more than 8 life veins? 8. What does 8 life veins mean? As a natal cultivator, Su Ku knew very well. I've never heard of a cultivator with 8 lifelines in the Fengtian Fate sect. Is this kid new to the sect? Su Ku's eyes flickered with suspicion. However, at this moment, he was more willing to believe that Nie Tian had a secret technique to hide his lifeline. At the Fengtian Fate sect did have such a secret technique. No, this kind of secret technique was extremely difficult to cultivate, and it did not have any practical use. It did not improve the martial artist's body, and it could only hide one's lifeline. Therefore, the Fengtian Fate sect didn't cultivate such secret art. Maybe this guy is a weirdo who likes to cultivate flashy but impractical things. Su Ku calmed down a little, and her heart calmed down a lot. She looked at Nie Tian and asked, "Kid, what's your name?" The corner of Heaven's lips twitched as he smiled. "Block my sword and you will have the right to know my name." "Humph, is that so?" Su Ku's eyes darkened as she sneered. "I hope your strength matches your arrogance. Make your move." Nie Tian was still calm, and there was not the slightest ripple in his eyes. Su Ku was only of the first level of the Sky Awakening realm. He posed no threat to him. If Su Ku was of the first level of the Sky Martial realm, perhaps Nie Tian would look him in the eye. Sadly, he didn't. Die. Su Ku roared, clearly infuriated. Energy poured out of her body, vibrating in the air and exploding in a thunderous rumble. What a powerful qi! The crowd felt the pressure from the sky and they all gasped. Wenluan's eyes trembled, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He was clearly nervous. Lan Qing Lanche stared at Nie Tian. She was also very excited. Only Tang 13 crossed her arms in front of her chest, as if she didn't care at all. Because he knew that to Nie Tian, this battle was only a matter of one sword. Your qi is not bad, but it's too weak before me. At this moment Nie Tian spoke. He stood with his hands behind his back and took a step forward. A ray of sword energy howled out like an arrow, faster than the blink of an eye. Poof! In an instant, Suku felt a sharp killing intent coming at him, but before he could react, he heard the sound of flesh and bone being cut open. Then, in a flash of blood, Suku saw his left arm was cut off, and it was flying in the air. Chapter 4393. Ah! When he saw his left arm clearly, Suku felt a sharp pain coming from his left arm. In an instant, it spread throughout his entire body, causing him to scream in pain. Everything happened too quickly, leaving Suku no time to react. The speed of Nietion's sword had already reached an unbelievable level. The shocking scene high up in the sky caused everyone below to gasp, and they were instantly petrified on the spot. Almost no one had seen how Nietion had made his move. It was like a hallucination. Furthermore, the aura of the sword will was too terrifying. It was so sharp that it could tear everything apart in an instant. How is this possible? How could this be? Is that guy still human? After a long time, someone finally reacted, shock written perfectly on his face. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. How could Nietion, who was only at the 9th level of heavenly tribulation, possess such terrifying strength? Originally, everyone thought that Nietion wouldn't even be able to block a single move from Suku, but the truth was the exact opposite. Wenluan's eyes trembled incessantly, and he was dumbstruck. One sword, just one sword, or even just one sword intent, and Nietion instantly defeated Suku. This was a scene that Wenluan had never dreamed of. Suku was once Wenluan's best friend, so he was very clear about her strength. Even now, Suku's strength was definitely not below Wenluan's. But even then, Suku was unable to block a single strand of Nietion's sword intent. Lan Qing and Lan Che's reactions were even more exaggerated. Their small mouths were wide open and their lips were trembling, as though they wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Tang 13 was the only one who remained calm. She was not surprised at all. He knew very well how terrifying Nietion was. It was normal for people to be shocked when they saw Nietion fight for the first time. How could this be? Suku endured the pain, calmed down a little, and looked at Nietion in shock. It was hard for him to imagine that a 9th-level heavenly tribulation martial artist could have such strength. Fortunately, that sword intent had only chopped off his arm. If it had landed on his neck, he would already be a corpse. Obviously, Nietion did not want to kill anyone. I told you, you're too weak. Nietion smiled faintly, completely at ease. Suku's cultivation was only at the first stage of the heavenly awareness realm. In front of Nietion, she could not even withstand a single strike. If he was in the first level of the sky martial arts realm, it might be worth it for Nietion to use his sword. I've lost. Thank you for your mercy. Suku calmed down. Although her eyes were filled with unwillingness, she still bowed slightly. He wasn't the kind of person who didn't know his own limit. His strength was indeed much weaker than Nietion's. If Nietion didn't hold back, he would have died countless times. As Suku's figure descended, the crowd below finally reacted and exploded. Who is this silver-haired cultivator? How is he so strong? Is he really from our Fengtian Fate sect? How come I've never heard of such a freak from the Fengtian sect? Yeah, I've never seen him before either. Did he just join the sect? The Fengtian Fate sect's disciples were very excited. They looked at Nietion with undisguised joy and respect. Who would have thought that such an ordinary-looking fellow would be able to defeat Suku so easily? But they knew nothing about Nietion. None of them had even seen Nietion before. Therefore, many people couldn't help but wonder if Nietion was really a disciple of the Fengtian Fate sect. Facing the boiling crowd below, Nietion's face was calm. There was not a single ripple of emotion in his eyes. The power of one sword shocked the entire crowd. Nietion's gaze swept across the crowd as he asked, "Does anyone else want to challenge me?" His calm voice fell, but there was no response for a long time. Even the Gia sect's disciples were silent. Suku's strength was enough to rank in the top 10 among the Gya sect's third-generation disciples. But in front of Nye Tian, she did not even have the qualifications to make the latter draw his sword. The Gya sect naturally made great preparations for coming to challenge the Feng Tian Fate sect this time. Apart from Su Tu, Feng Li, and Su Ku, there were also several disciples with very strong strength. But the remaining few, although their strength was stronger than Su Ku, it was not by much. The only one who could easily defeat Su Tu was the top 3 among the third-generation disciples, Xianye. Originally, Xianye thought that he was just here to shock the crowd and would not have the chance to go on stage. But at this moment, he was somewhat silent. Senior apprentice brother Xianye, are you going to make a move? Finally, Su Ku opened her mouth and asked solemnly. Actually, he could already tell that Xianye was already timid. But at this time, only Xianye had the strength to fight against Nye Tian. Xianye's brows furrowed tightly. He did not speak but looked at an old man in green beside him. Xianye, it will be beneficial for you to fight against such an expert. The old man sighed softly and patted Xianye's shoulder. As for the outcome, you don't have to feel pressured. Third elder, then I'll go. Xianye nodded slightly and slowly walked out. The old man in green was the third elder of the Gya sect. Since he already said so, if Xianye still did not make a move, it would be a little unreasonable. And from the third elder's words, it could be heard that he no longer had any hope for this battle. Others might not be able to see through the sword intent from Nye Tian just now, but the third elder was a swordsman. Naturally, he could see how terrifying Nye Tian was. Just that sword intent was enough to pose a threat to a peak heavenly perception Saint Emperor. And this was under the situation where Nye Tian did not draw his sword. The third elder guessed that if Nye Tian drew his sword, only a sky martial saint ancestor would be able to fight against him. Xianye was an outstanding talent among the third-generation disciples of the Gya sect. He was one of the few in the top 3, but he was only at the third layer of heavenly perception realm. Before coming to the Feng Tian Fate sect, the third elder thought that he could easily stop the selection. He never thought that Nye Tian would appear out of nowhere. Before seeing Nye Tian, the third elder did not even believe that there was such a shocking existence in the world. Xianye's figure shot into the sky and stood coldly in the air, facing Nye Tian. Xianye of the Gya sect, please enlighten me. Xianye's eyes were dark as he slightly nodded, seeming very polite. Feng Tian Fate sect, Nye Tian. Nye Tian frowned and his lips twitched as he replied. Xianye's politeness was obviously because he was intimidated by Nye Tian's strength. If Nye Tian did not have such strength, Xianye would definitely not be so polite. The crowd below was curious when they saw Xianye going up. This guy really doesn't care about his life. He actually dares to go up and challenge. His name is Xianye. Could he be the top 3 super genius in the Gya sect? It should be him. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to challenge. The crowd's eyes lit up as they spoke. If it was the super genius of the Gya sect, perhaps this battle would be worth watching. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Com. Wonderful Book House Mobile Version. Com. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Com. For mobile version. M. Chapter 4394. High up in the sky, Nye Tian and Xianye stood in the air, confronting each other. Except, Nye Tian's eyes were filled with calmness, while Xianye's eyes, other than being gloomy, were even more nervous. Actually, before Xianye made his move, it was already destined that he would lose. Being afraid before the battle was a taboo in battle. No matter who the enemy was, one should not be afraid. If you were afraid, you would lose. If you were afraid, you would never win. If you were afraid, you could only be the loser. Facing the obviously timid Xianye, Nye Tian did not want to waste time and said directly. Xianye did not speak. Instead, his figure moved and he made his move. He knew that if he let Nye Tian make the first move, he would not even have the chance to make a move. Boom! The moment Xianye's figure moved, a terrifying aura soared into the sky outside his body. It rapidly condensed in the air and formed a dark spear shadow. It was like a pillar of heaven and earth crossing between heaven and earth. Black. The dark spear shadow condensed behind Xianye and continuously released a terrifying spear intent, shocking the surroundings. Next, the crowd felt a powerful spear intent pressure, and their expressions could not help but change greatly. What a powerful aura! Xianye is indeed the top 3 peerless genius of Gia sect. Looking at his spear intent, he should have already stepped into the god-defying spear sense realm. I knew that Xianye was strong, but I did not expect him to be strong to this extent. Looks like this battle will be interesting. Everyone discussed, and the light in their eyes became even brighter. So Senior Xian is actually so strong. The few disciples of Gia sect were similarly excited, and felt that Xian should have the ability to fight against Nye Tian. However, after a glint of light flashed across the third elder's eyes, his old face rapidly darkened. Even he did not expect Xianye to be so strong. However, after a short moment of surprise, he understood very well that Xianye was still not Nye Tian's opponent. Because the sword intent that Nye Tian revealed previously, even he felt a trace of threat. At this moment, he had another worry. If Xianye displayed too strong of a strength, would it cause Nye Tian to have the intention to kill him? By the more talented Xianye was, the greater the threat he posed to the Feng Tian Fate sect. Nye as a member of the Fire Heaven Fate School, Tian didn't want the school to have a powerful enemy in the future. Although it was only a challenge, Nye Tian could use a momentary lapse as an excuse to kill Xianye. Thinking of this, the third elder could not help but sweat on his forehead, and his eyes trembled slightly. Third elder, please be at ease. I don't think this person is a narrow-minded person. He probably won't injure Xianye. At this moment, the green-robed old man who had been standing beside the third elder spoke up. Obviously, he saw the third elder's worry. I hope so. The third elder was slightly relieved, but he was still a little nervous. If he could, he would rather stop this battle. I didn't expect you to be a gunner. Nye Tian calmly looked at Xianye and faintly smiled. With your spear intent, it's enough to contend against a pinnacle heavenly perception realm expert. Unfortunately, the person you met was me. Xianye's eyes darkened slightly as he burned with rage. Although he didn't say anything, Nye Tian's words made him extremely angry. How could he not hear that Nye Tian didn't put him in his eyes at all? He was a genius. Not to mention the Gia sect, even in the entire 7 sacred world of cultivators, he was a genius that could be counted on one's fingers. However, Nye Tian didn't even look at him. How could he not be angry? And how could Xianye know that not to mention the geniuses of the 7 sacred world of cultivators, Nye Tian didn't even care about the young human emperor Lin Fan. Wu person's heart of martial arts should be as firm as a rock and not be affected by the outside world. You strong or weak, I'm still me. Demon King's spear, wolf kills 1,000 miles. In the next moment, Xianye let out a low roar and moved his long spear. Spear intent condensed in the place where the tip of the spear was pointing, and a huge, dark wolf appeared. It seemed to tear through the void and charge towards Nye Tian, howling in all directions. Nye Tian instantly felt the killing intent assaulting him. However, the corner of his mouth only twitched slightly. Then, he gently stomped his foot on the ground and moved his hands at the same time. Sword intent condensed at the tips of his fingers, and then he pointed them out, piercing through the air with a whistling sound. Bang! High up in the sky, the sword intent was like a blade. It was barely visible, but its aura had reached an extreme. The instant it collided with the giant dark wolf, a muffled sound was heard and waves surged. Boom! 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 The surging power wreaked havoc in the void and spread in all directions. Xian Ya's eyes couldn't help but narrow. He instantly felt a sharp aura pressing down on him, causing him to retreat in shock. However, he was still a step too late and a deep sword mark appeared on his face. Reverse as for Nie Tian, he was like a mountain as the waves passed by. His figure did not move at all. The waves dispersed, and everyone saw Nie Tian and Xian Ya's figures clearly. They were utterly shocked. This time, Nie Tian still did not draw his sword. He only pointed out gently and broke through Xian Ya's attack, even injuring him. Although Xian Ya was powerful and had the advantage of striking first, he could not even withstand a single strike from Nie Tian. Originally, everyone thought that Xian Ya was enough to deal with Nie Tian. Even if he lost, he should be able to withstand a few strikes. However, looking at it now, they had still greatly underestimated Nie Tian's strength. Difficult, they could not believe that a mere saint king of heavenly tribulation could face a peak genius of a saint's world in such a dominating manner. Xian Ya's body trembled slightly. The sword mark on his face was especially glaring. It was like a sharp blade that had stabbed into his heart, shattering all the pride and dignity he had built up over so many years. But below, Wenluan was already dumbfounded. He stared at the silver-haired figure in the sky as if he had been petrified. He felt that the latter was as majestic as a god. Thinking about how he had wanted to fight Nie Tian previously, Wenluan felt a chill down his spine. Nie Tian had completely overturned his understanding of the martial way. It turned out that he, the first disciple of the Heavenly Beacon sect, was just a frog at the bottom of a well. The sisters Lan Qing and Lan Che were even more shocked. They were dumbfounded as if they had lost their minds. One beside them, Tang 13, had a smile on her face. She enjoyed the current expressions of Wenluan and the others very much. The other outside, the disciples of Gia's sect, were unable to react for a long time, as if they had been electrocuted. 3. The elder looked at Nie Tian, his lips twitching. He clearly wanted to say something, but he could not. He clearly saw that Nie Tian stood where he was without moving at all. He allowed the waves to sweep over him, but he was not injured at all. Even a saint emperor of heavenly enlightenment would not dare to forcefully resist the impact of that level with his body. However, Nie Tian did not care at all. This, without a doubt, it meant that Nie Tian's martial body was far stronger than that of a saint emperor of heavenly enlightenment. It was not just a little bit stronger, but thousands of times stronger. Oni Saint King of the 9th grade of Heavenly Tribulation easily defeated a genius warrior of the 3rd grade of Heavenly Enlightenment realm without drawing his sword. In addition, this person had a powerful martial body that ordinary people could not hope to achieve. This was too terrifying. The third elder finally understood. So this was a true peerless Heaven's chosen. Chapter 4395. Heaven's favored son, peerless in his generation. High up in the sky, Nie Tian was surrounded by sword chi, and his aura was like a rainbow. Merely a single strand of sword insight had completely crushed Xian Ya as if he was crushing dry weeds. Xian Ya stood where he was. Although he did not suffer any heavy injuries, his entire person was like a fool as he stood there blankly, unable to react for a long time. It's before he came up. He was already aware of his failure. However, in the depths of his heart, there was still a trace of hope. He hoped that he could gain the upper hand by striking first and slightly suppress Nie Tian. He might even have a chance of winning. Unfortunately, Nie Tian's strength was far beyond his imagination. Xian Yi knew that he would lose, but he never imagined that he would lose so miserably, so thoroughly. Hiruntu at this moment, he finally understood the gap between him and Nie Tian. It couldn't even be described as the difference between heaven and earth. Or he might be a genius in front of others, but in front of Nie Tian, he was no different from a mediocre person. I have lost. Xianya finally opened his mouth after a long while. However, his tone was dejected and powerless. His eyes became lifeless, as if the flame that had always been burning in his heart had been extinguished forever. However, Nye Tian did not even look at him. Instead, he swept his cold gaze across the people below and finally locked onto the few people from Gia sect. Senior brother Xian, are you alright? Xian Ya's figure landed. Feng Li saw that the former's expression was a little strange, so he went up to show his concern. Xian Ya merely waved his hand slightly and did not speak. This child's methods are simply vicious. The third elder had long since seen through everything. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Although heaven did not kill Xian Ya, he left a sword mark on Xian Ya's face in a way that was close to cutting his heart. The humiliation of the sword scars was enough to completely crush the martial heart of a proud genius martial artist like Xian Ya. Hiruntushir Shinya looked normal on the surface, but his mind and willpower had already suffered a heavy blow. Just think about it, a genius who had always lived in the limelight was humiliated in front of so many people. How big of a blow would that be? Look in Xian Ya's current state, it was very possible that he would never be able to recover from this setback. The elder felt that Nye Tian intentionally did this, wanting to crush Xian Ya's martial Dao will. However, the eyes of the green-clothed old man beside the third elder sunk. He was silent for a moment before saying, I feel that this matter is not a bad thing for Xian Ya. If he can overcome this knot in his heart, it will be greatly beneficial to his future path of martial arts. The third elder frowned and his face darkened. The old man sighed, this kid is too powerful. With him, the Fengtian Fate School will rise again. Seventh elder, you mean? The third elder's face suddenly changed, but he heard another layer of meaning from the seventh elder's words, and his tone immediately became gloomy. This time, the third elder and the seventh elder were the leaders of the group. Although the position of an elder was above that of the seventh elder was the one who had the final say. The seventh elder's character was extremely profound. He looked calm and indifferent on the surface, but in fact, he was as shrewd as an abyss, hiding a dagger in his smile. Moreover, among the 9 elders of the Gia sect, the seventh elder's strength was the most unpredictable, and it was said that he was not any weaker than the first elder. Moreover, the first elder greatly relied on the seventh elder, which was why he was sent here this time. Although the seventh elder's words sounded like he was sighing, it was actually filled with killing intent. Let's return to the sect first. The seventh elder looked at the silver-haired swordsman in the sky with a gloomy gaze. His killing intent was obvious, and he nodded and sighed. Return to the sect. The third elder's face sank, and he immediately understood. Without further delay, he led the people of the Gia sect and directly left. After all, this was the Fengtian Fate School's territory. Directly making a move was no different from courting death. Although the higher-ups of the Fengtian Fate School had yet to show themselves, who knew how many experts were hiding in the surroundings. Although the third and seventh elders of the Gia sect were strong, they knew that it was impossible for them to fight against the entire Fengtian Fate School. After all, the Fengtian Fate School used to be the absolute ruler of the seventh sacred world of cultivators. Even if it had declined, it still had a strong foundation and strength. It was even unknown whether the Gia sect was stronger than the Fengtian Fate School. If the third and seventh elders wanted to kill Nye Tian, it would be no different from hitting a rock with an egg. Nye Tian looked at the people of the Gia sect leaving, and a cold smile appeared on his face. He used the sword mark to humiliate Xian Ya. Although it was true that he wanted to kill him, it was more to teach the Gia sect a lesson and intimidate their arrogance. At the same time, it was also a warning to the other sections. The reason why the people of the Gia sect dared to challenge the Fengtian Fate School was because the Fengtian Fate School was weak. At this moment, if Nye Tian did not act tough, Who knew how many more people would come to challenge him? Ghost. After the people of the Cliff sect left, the crowd finally reacted and looked at the silver-haired cultivator in the sky with complicated gazes. The Gia sect was defeated just like that? Who is this guy? How can he be so strong? He defeated the Gia sect all by himself. I've never heard of such a person in the Fengtian Fate sect. Looks like the Fengtian Fate sect has quite a deep foundation. This guy is much stronger than First Brother Wenluan. Looks like the #1 position in the Fengtian Fate sect will change hand. Everyone from the Heaven Extinguishing sect and the Heaven Extinguishing sect was shocked by Nie Tian's strength. The Gia sect has left. Is there anyone else who wants to challenge the Fengtian Fate sect? Nie Tian scanned the crowd and his cold voice resounded in everyone's ears. Soon as he finished speaking, the entire place was deathly silent, to the point that even a pin drop could be heard. The Gia sect had the potential to be the #1 sect among the 7 cultivators of true virtue, yet it had been defeated by Nie Tian alone. At this time, who would dare to step forward and challenge him? Since no one says anything, then I will pretend that no one wants to challenge me. Nie Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. The Fengtian Fate sect is holding the Fengtian selection. On behalf of the Fengtian Fate sect, I welcome all of you here. However, if anyone with bad intentions tries to disrupt the Fengtian selection, the Fengtian Fate sect will not let anyone bully us. As he uttered the last word, Nie Tian's eyes shone with sharpness. Everyone kept quiet out of fear and had their own thoughts. Indeed, other than the Gia sect, there were many cultivators from other sects here. Some were here to watch a good show while others had other intentions. But Nie Tian's appearance was out of their expectations and disrupted some people's original plans. The Fengtian selection was going to be a big show. After Tian finished speaking, he landed next to Tang 13 and the others and left together. Everyone stared at the back of Nie Tian's group with complicated feelings. Wenluan, Lan Qing, and Lan Che also followed Nie Tian and Tang 13. The group left the crowd and arrived at a secluded mountain. Nie Tian, who are you? Why are you helping the Fengtian Fate sect? Wenluan saw that there were no outsiders here, so he no longer hid anything and asked directly. Previously, Nie Tian said that he was here to participate in the Fengtian selection, but later on, he represented the Fengtian Fate sect to accept the challenge and beat the Gia sect. This made Wenluan suspicious of his identity and even more cautious. I am the Beacon Emperor. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He didn't turn around and spoke with his back facing Wenluan. Chapter 4396. I am the Beacon Emperor. These words were spoken calmly, but they were like thunder in the ears of Wenluan, Lan Qing, and Lan Che. They were stunned as if they were struck by lightning. How could they have imagined that the silver-haired young man in front of them was the Beacon Emperor? The Beacon Emperor, the Beacon Sky Supreme, the supreme being of the Beacon Sky Fate sect. Before knowing Nie Tian's identity, Wenluan already had several guesses in his mind. However, he never would have guessed that Nie Tian was the Beacon Emperor. I believe you all already know that Mr. Ling Shuang Wuchen has found a new Beacon Emperor for the Beacon Sky Fate sect. After a while, when Wenluan and the others calmed down, Nie Tian said, however, you all never thought that the new Beacon Emperor would be me. Nie Tian, you said that you are the Beacon Emperor. How do you prove it? Wenluan frowned as he did not believe Nie Tian's identity. Nie Tian smiled faintly and activated the life meridians in his body. Waves of majestic life energy were released, stunning Wenluan and the others once again. Wenluan could clearly feel that Nie Tian had 9 life meridians in his body. They were like dragons that were extremely vigorous. He had never seen a martial artist with 9 life meridians, nor had he seen a life meridian with such a terrifying life energy. 9 life meridians were enough to fuse with the Beacon Sky technique, and the person who fused with the Beacon Sky technique was the Beacon Emperor. This meant that Nye Tian was really the Beacon Emperor. Wenluan greets Your Excellency. Wenluan regained his composure and bowed deeply with a solemn expression. Lan Qing and Lan Che greet Sir Beacon Emperor. Seeing this, Lan Qing and Lan Che immediately bowed and said in unison, No need for formalities. Nye Tian waved his hand and said, I don't want to attract too much attention with my identity. Keep it a secret for now. Yes. The three answered in unison. Wenluan then said, Sir Beacon Emperor, since you're here, you should meet the sect master and the flag lords, right? After what happened just now, they will come looking for me soon. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Wenluan, what do you think about this year's Sky Beacon selection? Wenluan's eyes narrowed. He paused for a moment before speaking. Sir Beacon Emperor, to be honest, I don't agree with this selection. But since teacher has decided, I will do my best to carry it out. Who is your teacher? Nye Tian frowned and asked. Sect Master Ling Shuang Wuchen, Wenluan replied respectfully. So, you're Mr. Ling's disciple. No wonder you're so strong. Nye Tian laughed in surprise. Lord Beacon Emperor, you must be joking, Wenluan said awkwardly, blushing. He was the chief disciple, but he was powerless against the Gia sect's challenge earlier. He felt like he had let the sect down. You don't need to be depressed. Those people from the Gia sect are indeed very strong. Nye Tian's expression turned serious. If you're given the same cultivation conditions, you might not necessarily be weaker than them. Wenluan nodded and regained his composure. In fact, he was still not used to Nye Tian's identity as the Beacon Emperor, especially after seeing how young Nye Tian was, even younger than him. Wenluan was once regarded as the hope of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect, and Ling Shuang Wuchen even tried to make him fuse with the Heaven Beacon art. Unfortunately, Wenluan did not have 9 life meridians, so every attempt ended in failure. Nye Tian didn't know what Wenluan was thinking and asked with a smile, Wenluan, why don't you agree with the selection? Wenluan frowned. Although the Beacon Heaven Fate sect was once the ruler of the 7th Cultivator's sacred realm, it has declined. If they hold such a large-scale selection, they will undoubtedly become the target of everyone. Just like the Heavenly Ghost Cliff. If the Beacon Emperor didn't personally come, the consequences would be unimaginable. Nye Tian slightly nodded and said, You're right to worry. However, the selection is still an opportunity for the Beacon Heaven Fate sect. If they succeed, they will have a chance to rise again. What if they fail? Wenluan's eyes flickered. If they fail, then the Beacon Heaven Fate sect will fall into a quagmire and might even face the danger of being destroyed. Nye Tian's lips curled into a bitter smile. Wenluan's eyes darkened. Isn't that courting death? If they don't hold the selection, then the Beacon Heaven Fate sect will be waiting for death. Tang 13 raised her brows before Nye Tian could speak. Then, waiting for death is still better than courting death, right? Lan Che glanced at Tang 13 and snapped. Not necessarily. Tang 13 smiled. At least courting death will be in your own hands. You. Lan Che's face turned red from anger, but he couldn't say anything. Nye Tian couldn't help but smile. The future of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect must be in your own hands. Although the Sky Beacon selection is a risk, it is a necessary step. Nye Tian speculated that the reason why Ling Shuang Wuchen chose to hold the selection at this time was because he knew that Nye Tian would come to the Beacon Heaven Fate sect. It was obvious that Ling Shuang Wuchen was placing all the hope of the sect's rise on Nye Tian. Mr. Ling, you made me the Beacon Emperor and saved my life. I will not disappoint you. Nye Tian's eyes were deep as he thought to himself. Since the Beacon Emperor thinks that the selection is necessary, then Wenluan will do his best to ensure the success of the selection. Wenluan could feel the strong confidence in Nye Tian's eyes and said in a serious tone. Nye Tian nodded slightly, feeling relieved. Someone's here. At this time, Tang 13 suddenly smiled and turned around. A figure in black had appeared out of nowhere. You're here for me, right? Nie Tian was not surprised to see the man in black. He only smiled. Mr. Nie Tian, Vice Commander Fan invites you. The man in black bowed slightly in a very respectful manner. Okay, lead the way. Nie Tian had expected this and let the man in black lead the way. You guys can come as well. The man in black glanced at Wen Luan and the others, nodded and led the way. A moment later, under the man in black's lead, Nie Tian and the others arrived outside of Torture Peak. Please. The man in black bowed and pointed at the hall. Nie Tian felt that something was wrong with the atmosphere and frowned. However, he did not have much of a reaction. Instead, he walked into the hall. In the hall, the atmosphere was dead silent and murderous. In the middle of the hall sat a strong old man with white hair and a beard. His eyes were like fire and his short hair was like needles. Like a lion, his aura was extremely strong. Several experts with vigorous auras were sitting in the seats below the sturdy old man. At this moment, all of them were staring at Nie Tian with sharp gazes. Chapter 4397. Nie Tian's gaze swept across everyone in the hall. Sensing the cold and silent atmosphere, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but pull up into a strange smile. Look, from the looks of it, they were going to interrogate Nie Tian. Feng. At this moment, Wen Luan also sensed that something was wrong with the atmosphere. His expression changed, and just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Nie Tian with a wave of his hand. Nie Tian was not in a hurry. He wanted to see what these people wanted to do. You're Nie Tian? The short old man sitting in the middle of the hall spoke in a deep voice. His voice was like a lion's, and his voice was like a clap of thunder. It exploded in the air, and it carried an extremely dense, oppressive aura. That's right. Nie Tian nodded without fear. The short-haired old man's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Apparently, he hadn't expected that Nie Tian would still be so calm and unruffled by his imposing aura. The gazes of the others also trembled, and they were deeply surprised. Short, the old man was none other than one of the 4 banner masters of the Heaven Beacon sect, Banner Master Fan Zhong. With Fan Zhong's strength, not to mention the Wind Heaven Fate sect, he could even be ranked in the entire 7 cultivators' sacred world. But under such pressure, Nie Tian was actually able to remain so calm and collected. How could it not be surprising? Feng Tianming sect, 1 emperor, 2 sects, 4 banners and 8 protectors. But this was because Sky Beacon had declined and was weak. The 2 sects, 4 banners and 8 protectors were already weak in name. The 2 sects were Ling Shuang Wuchen and Gu Ling Wuqi. However, Gu Ling Wuqi had left the sect a long time ago, so Ling Shuang Wuchen was the only one in charge now. The 4 banner lords were no longer complete. The leader of the 4 banners, Du Wujuan, had also left the Feng Tianming sect. The remaining 3 flag leaders were Fan Zhong, the leader of the Tianyue flag, Shen Yunhe, the leader of the Sealing Cloud flag, and Wen Ho, the leader of the 4 Calamities flag. Among them, the flag master of the 4 Tribulations flag was injured in his early years and was in a state of seclusion. He recuperated in the Wen family and did not come out for tens of thousands of years. Therefore, only Tianyue flag master Fan Zhong and Sealing Cloud flag master Shen Yunhe were left. The 8 protectors, only half remained in the sect. Feng, even the upper echelons of the Destiny sect had withered to such an extent. One could only imagine how many people were left below them. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the Feng Tian Fate sect was only an empty shell. Nie Tian, just who are you and why did you come to the Heaven Fire Beacon sect? Tell me the truth. Fan Zhong's face darkened and his eyes turned cold. His oppressive aura suddenly became much denser. Winlan instantly understood something, and he was just about to step forward to defend Nie Tian when he was stopped by Nie Tian again. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his face calm. I'm here to participate in the selection. Really? With a cold smile, Fan Zhong said, Nie Tian, as soon as you arrived at the Heaven Beacon mountain range, You injured Shin Qi, the son of Vice Sect Master Shin. Then, you investigated the Heaven Beacon Fate Sect, and even accepted the challenge from the Ghost Cliff Sect as a disciple of the Heaven Beacon Fate Sect. Do you think this Flag Master will believe you if you say that you're only here to participate in the Sky Beacon selection? Fan Zhong's gaze darkened and his aura grew stronger. It seemed that if Nie Tian's answer didn't satisfy him, he would directly attack. Nie Tian frowned. Tian furrowed his brows and faintly smiled. So every move I made after entering the Sky Beacon mountain range was clearly seen by all of you. If that's the case, then let me ask Flag Master Fan, you only said that I injured Shin Qi, but why didn't you tell me why? You said that I scouted around the Sky Beacon mountain range. Did I harm the Heaven Fire Beacon sect's interests? Didn't the Heaven Fire Beacon sect open its gates to the public for people to see? Why can others see it but I can't? You said that I accepted the Gia sect's challenge as a disciple of the Heaven Fire Beacon sect. That's even less of a responsibility. At the time, many disciples of the Heaven Fire Beacon sect were watching. You should know better than me what would have happened to the Heaven Fire Beacon sect, right? Each of his words contained a strong questioning tone. It was clear that Nie Tian was a little angry. Fan Zhong coldly stared at Nie Tian. Although he was trying his best to hide it, the killing intent in his eyes could be faintly seen. Tang 13 was very sensitive to Fan Zhong's reaction. He couldn't help but wonder why the latter would want to kill Nie Tian. Even if Nie Tian was suspicious, he had still helped the Heaven Fire Beacon sect and saved their face in front of the other sections. No matter what, this was still considered a contribution. As the Flag Master of the Heaven Fire Beacon sect, Fan Zhong wanted to kill Nie Tian just because of a little suspicion. This was clearly not normal. There must be a reason behind it. Fan Zhong, the expressions of the others were a little gloomy, as if they were thinking about something. They weren't idiots and could naturally tell that something was wrong. Nie Tian, no matter what you say, it's a fact that you've injured Shin Ku. Fan Zhong's eyes grew grim as he said, you must be plotting something by investigating the Fate sect. You impersonating a disciple of the sect is an unforgivable crime. An unforgivable crime. Nie Tian's eyes changed and his expression darkened. Fan Zhong's unforgivable crime came out of nowhere. Nie Tian, this old man is very strange. Let's talk to him with your identity. Tang 13 sensed something and secretly sent a message to Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded, but he wasn't in a hurry. He stared straight at Fan Zhong and said, Flag Master Fan, I'm only representing the Heaven Fire Beacon sect to fight against the Gia sect. Instead of saying that I did something, you're saying that my crime is unforgivable. I really don't understand. With that, Nie Tian's tone changed and became cold. Perhaps you don't want to see the Gia sect fail, or perhaps I'm blocking your path by forcing the Gia sect to retreat. Is that so? Brat, what do you mean by that? Upon hearing Nie Tian's words, Fan Zhong was instantly enraged. He sprang to his feet like an enraged lion, unleashing his powerful aura. Nie Tian felt the terrifying pressure, but he wasn't afraid at all. He smiled and said, Flag Master Fan, I'm sure you understand what I mean. At this moment, the others' expressions changed as well. Nie Heaven had hinted that Fan Zhong was in cahoots with the Gia sect. Or it was too early to talk about cahoots, but there was definitely a connection. Fan Zhong's anger and murderous intent towards Nie Tian were not normal. Feng. Everyone in the Heaven Fire Beacon sect knew that Fan Zhong and Xin Yunhe didn't get along, so Fan Zhong wouldn't vent his anger on Nie Tian. But the accusation that Nie Tian had taken a stroll around the Heaven Conducting Fate sect was also a false accusation. The only thing that angered Fan Zhong was that Nie Tian forced the Gia sect to retreat. If that was the case, it was highly possible that Fan Zhong was in cahoots with the Gia sect. Difficult could it be that Fan Zhong and the Gia sect were in cahoots? Brat, you're courting death. Fan Zhong's eyes were dark and trembling. He could no longer suppress the anger that he had been suppressing in his heart and exploded. He roared and slapped his palm furiously. The majestic palm energy surged and pressed down on Nye Tian. Please remember this book's domain name. Com. Wonderful Book House's mobile version. Com. Chapter 4398. Boom! In the great hall of the Heaven Commanding Sect's Punishment Peak, Fan Zhong, the sect master of the Heavenly Mountain Division, launched a furious attack. His palm slammed down towards Nye Tian like a mountain. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian felt the pressure of heaven and earth, and his expression flickered. He did not expect Fan Zhong to be so bold as to attack him under the watchful eyes of everyone in the Punishment Peak. After all, this was the Xing Peak's hall. Even though his status wasn't as high as Fan Zhong's, it wasn't too far off. Fan Zhong was furious. It was obvious that he was trying to kill Qin Fan. However, the others were only surprised. They didn't try to stop him. Fan Zhong was a divine ancestor in the 8th layer Heaven Martial Realm. He was only one step away from the peak Heaven Martial Realm. Fan Zhong knew that Nye Tian wasn't an ordinary heavenly tribulation cultivator, so he put more force into his attack. Even the weaker Sky Martial Arts Saint Ancestor would lose his reputation on the spot, let alone a Heavenly Tribulation Saint King. No matter how strong Nye Tian was, it was impossible for him to be on par with a Heavenly Tribulation cultivator. Fan Zhong was sure that Nye Tian would die if his attack landed. Nye Tian stood there, his body as still as a mountain. Facing the palm strike, Nye Tian only took a light step forward. Instantly, a surge of sword intense soared into the sky and morphed into a sword shadow, which bore the weight of 1,000 kilograms. Bang! The next second, the sword shadow shattered into pieces after a muffled sound. Sword chi surged in all directions. However, the palm shadow lost its power and shattered when it was about to land on Nye Tian's head. Nye Tian, however, shuddered slightly as he took a few steps back before coming to a firm stop, his expression as calm as ever. How is this possible? Fan Zhong's eyes widened and he exclaimed in shock. The attack was strong enough to kill a heavenly martial realm cultivator, but Nye Tian had blocked it so easily. Fan Zhong was shocked. Besides, Nye Tian had only released a sword intent. He hadn't even used his sword yet, which meant that he hadn't shown his true strength. When the others saw this, they all gasped in shock. Was the person standing in front of them really just a Heavenly Tribulation Sage King martial artist? If that was really the case, then the strength that Nye Tian had revealed had overturned everyone's understanding of the martial Tao. Wen Luan and the others were also stunned. Even though they had already seen Nye Tian in action, the shock they felt at this moment was even more intense. One had to know that the person who had attacked was none other than Tianyue Flag Master Fan Zhong. Fan Zhong wasn't someone that Xian Ye and Su Ku could compare to. He was a true expert. However, Nye Tian's expression did not change. This meant that he had the confidence to face Fan Zhong head-on. But was it possible? A Saint King of the Heavenly Tribulation was fighting against an expert who had almost stepped into the peak of the Sky Martial Arts realm. That was too shocking. Flag Master Fan, have you lost your cool so quickly? Are you planning to silence me? The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he coldly stared at Fan Zhong. There was also killing intent in his eyes. Fan Zhong clenched his fists tightly. The muscles on his face were twitching. Nye Tian's eyes were like a pair of sharp blades that mercilessly pierced through his disguise. Moreover, Nye Tiancheng was extremely powerful. He had actually forced Fan Zhong to such a state without batting an eyelid. At this moment, Fan Zhong couldn't help but be in a dilemma. He hadn't expected Nye Tian's strength to be so powerful. Since he had already attacked, the others were doubtful. He had failed to kill Nye Tian with his first attack. If he attacked again, he would really lose all face as a flag master. More importantly, no one had stopped him just now, but that didn't mean that no one would step forward later. In the current situation, Nie Tian had already gained the upper hand. Fan Zhong was in a difficult position. Nie Tian's calmness also made Fan Zhong a little hesitant. Fan Zhong even had a vague feeling that Nie Tian's peak strength might not be weaker than his. Although this thought was unbelievable, the silver-haired young man in front of him obviously couldn't be judged with common sense. It wasn't strange for anything to happen to him. "Brat, don't slander me." Fan Zhong took a deep breath to calm himself down. He said in a deep voice, "You purposely infuriated me so that I would attack you. I think you're the one with evil intentions." "Humph." Nie Tian couldn't help but laugh. He said in a disdainful tone, "Flag Master Fan, you're the first person I've seen who can distort black and white so confidently. Looks like our Feng Tian Fate sect is really full of hidden talent." Fan Zhong frowned. He could tell that there was something wrong with Nie Tian's words. He said coldly, "Brat, you're from the Feng Tian Fate sect?" "He's." Upon seeing this, Wen Luan took a step forward. Just as he was about to reveal Nie Tian's identity, he suddenly felt a powerful force assaulting him from behind, causing his entire body to involuntarily shudder. He turned around and saw a gray-robed figure charging towards him like a bolt of lightning. His aura was vast and mighty, and while he was still in midair, he struck out with his palm towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian also felt the powerful pressure. His expression darkened as he unsheathed the sword in the sky. A sharp sword intent rushed out from his back to resist the sudden palm strike. Bang! In the next second, a muffled sound was heard. Amidst the explosion, waves of energy surged out and wreaked havoc. Nie Tian's figure retreated dozens of meters before he managed to stabilize himself. However, he spat out a mouthful of blood and his face was as pale as a sheet. In the great hall, a gray-robed figure descended. His aura was violent like a wild beast. Flag Master Shun. This sudden scene caused everyone's expression to change. When they saw who it was, they couldn't help but exclaim out loud. It was none other than one of the 4 Flag Masters of the Feng Tian Fate sect, Flag Master Xin Yunhe. Xin Yunhe didn't look old, only middle-aged. His eyes were extremely vicious as they locked onto Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned. The blood on his lips disappeared and he regained his aura. That palm strike just now was too dangerous. If he didn't draw his sword in time, he would have been a corpse by now. Xin Yunhe injured Nie Tian with one palm while Fan Zhong missed. This was not because Xin Yunhe was stronger than Fan Zhong, but because Fan Zhong didn't use his full strength. However, Xin Yunhe's angry palm strike had obviously used 70 to 80% of his strength. Even so, his palm strike only slightly injured Nie Tian. To Nie Tian, who had the 10th meridian, this kind of injury was nothing. "You didn't die from my palm strike. You do have some strength." Xin Yunhe stood still and stared coldly at Nie Tian. "So you're Xin Qi's father, and you've come to avenge your son, haven't you?" Nie Tian took a step forward, his face grim and terrifying. "Young man, to be so calm even in the face of death, I admire you." Xin Yunhe snickered. A monstrous amount of energy surged around him. It was powerful beyond compare and contained the power of thunder. This! Everyone in the hall couldn't help but gasp when they saw this. Who would have thought that Xin Yunhe would use the power of his blood? It was obvious that Xin Yunhe was determined to kill Nie Tian. This was not surprising. Xin Yunhe had always been domineering, and no one in the Feng Tian Fate sect dared to provoke him. However, his only son was injured in front of everyone. How could he not be angry? Fan Zhong looked at Xin Yunhe and could not help but raise the corners of his mouth, revealing a sinister expression. He had missed the first chance to kill Nie Tian, and it was no longer suitable for him to do so. Xin Yunhe's arrival was perfect. He could borrow Xin Yunhe's hand to kill Nie Tian. Please remember this book's domain name. Com. Wonderful Book House Mobile Version Website. Com. Chapter 4399. Fengtian Fate Sect Torture Peak Hall. Nye the god of heaven looked at everyone in the hall with a cold expression. He seemed to have fallen into a desperate situation. Xin Yunhe was in front of him, and Fan Zhong was behind him. Xin Yunhe and Fan Zhong were both flag masters of the Fengtian Fate Sect. They were only second to the sect master, Leng Shuang Wuchen. In the unstable Fengtian Fate Sect, not only did Xin Yunhe and Fan Zhong not work together, but they also had a deep grudge against each other. Back then, both of them were qualified to compete for the position of sect master, but they lost to Leng Shuang Wuchen in the end. Although both of them were flag masters now, everyone knew that they had never given up on the idea of becoming sect master. Xin Yunhe and Fan Zhong each had their own masters, and it seemed like they were going to stand on their own. However, they had been lying low due to Leng Shuang Wuchen's strength. This time, when Leng Shuang Wuchen wanted to hold the Sky Beacon selection, Xin Yunhe and Fan Zhong were united and strongly opposed it. But in the end, the Sky Beacon selection was held on schedule with Leng Shuang Wuchen's strong support. This Xin Yunhe and Fan Zhong must have held a grudge against Nye Tian. Therefore, it was not surprising that they would attack Nye Tian now. As for the others in the hall, they had no intention of stopping them. Die, kid. At that moment, the thundercloud power wreathing Xin Yunhe grew even more violent. With a bellow, he launched a palm strike towards Nye Tian with overwhelming lightning power. Nye the sky sword whistled through the air, and its sword intent soared into the sky. Bang! In the next instant, a muffled sound was heard. Nye Tian was knocked back again. He spat out a mouthful of blood while he was still in the air. When he stabilized his body, his face was as pale as a sheet. It was a frightening sight. The palm landed and heavily injured Nye Tian. Xin Yunhe didn't smile. Instead, he was surprised and confused. Just now he had used the power of his bloodline and used almost all of his strength in that attack, but it didn't kill Nye Tian. How could he not be surprised? He was very suspicious. Was the person standing in front of him really only at the 9th level of heavenly tribulation? This kid is simply nature-defying. The others were also very shocked when they saw this scene. They were all Sky Martial Saint ancestors. How could they not see how terrifying Xin Yunhe's attack was? Even they would be severely injured if they were to take this palm head-on, much less an ordinary 9th heavenly tribulation holy king. However, Nye Tian was only seriously injured. This was too terrifying. Difficult in other words, Nye Tian's strength was no longer beneath theirs? This kid must not be allowed to live. Behind Nye Tian, Fan Zhong's eyes flickered with a cold light, and his killing intent was heavy. The stronger Nye Tian was, the more flustered Fan Zhong became. Hiruntu at that time, he made up his mind. If Xin Yunhe didn't kill Nye Tian, then he would kill Nye Tian even if he didn't care about his identity as the Flag Overlord. Nye Tian, are you okay? Tang 13's body moved and she appeared next to Nye Tian. She asked in a low voice. Nye Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and shook his head slightly. After taking a deep breath, his originally pale face relaxed. How is this possible? Xin Yunhe frowned and exclaimed. Nye Tian was clearly seriously injured just now. How could he recover in the blink of an eye? If even geniuses with 7 fate meridians couldn't have such a strong life force and recovery ability. 9 fate meridians is indeed powerful. When Luan knew Nye Tian's identity, and was deeply shocked by the power of 9 fate meridians. No didn't know that Nye Tian didn't have 9 fate meridians. He had the ultimate secret of fate meridians, the 10th fate meridian. Although the injury was serious, it wasn't fatal to Nye Tian, who had the 10th fate meridian. This kid's fate meridians are strange. He really is from the Fengtian Fate Sect. Fan Zhong also realized that something was wrong. He sensed that Nye Tian had at least 7 fate meridians, or even more. However, he was curious as to why the Fengtian Fate Sect had such a genius. Difficult could it be that Nie Tian was secretly trained by Ling Shuang Wuchen? If that was the case, didn't it mean that Ling Shuang Wuchen still had something up his sleeves? The more Fan Zhong thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. Otherwise, why would Ling Shuang Wuchen hold the Feng Tian selection under such pressure? Kid, since you're Ling Shuang Wuchen's man, I can't let you live. Fan Zhong's murderous intent intensified. He even wanted to attack. But at that moment, Xin Yunhe took a step forward and was about to attack again. I didn't expect the flag master of the Feng Tian Fate sect to be such a shameless person. Nie Tian looked at Xin Yunhe coldly and said, "As the Beacon Emperor, even I feel ashamed for you. Kid, you." Xin Yunhe's murderous intent was heavy, but he suddenly understood. His eyes narrowed and he asked in shock, "What did you say?" "Beacon Emperor." Fan Zhong also reacted and shouted in shock. "The Beacon Emperor," he said. "He's the Beacon Emperor." The others were stunned at first, then they exclaimed. Nie Tian called himself the Beacon Emperor. How could they not be surprised? Nie Tian's face was gloomy. He glanced at the crowd and said, "You didn't expect to meet me, the Beacon Emperor, in this way, right?" Xin Yunhe calmed down and stepped forward. "Kid, you said you're the Beacon Emperor. What proof do you have?" He did not believe that the young martial artist in front of him was the Beacon Emperor of the Feng Tian Fate sect. "It's fine if you pretend to be a disciple of the Feng Tian Fate sect, but if you dare to pretend to be the Beacon Emperor, I can kill you right now." Fan Zhong also stepped forward with murderous intent. Fan Zhong the others were also looking at Nie Tian. Obviously, they didn't believe him. "Is this enough?" Nie Tianling laughed. With a thought, the Beacon Emperor's mark appeared on his forehead. In an instant, the Beacon King's mark appeared on the foreheads of Fan Zhong and the others. "He can activate our Beacon Emperor's mark. He really is the Beacon Emperor!" Someone exclaimed in shock. You really are the Beacon Emperor." Xin Yunhe's eyes narrowed and he was stunned. His aura instantly dissipated, and he looked like a chicken that had lost its feathers. He would never have dreamed that Nie Tian was the Beacon Emperor, and he had almost killed the Beacon Emperor. "Flag Leader Fan, what do you have to say now? Do you still want to kill me?" Nie Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. He turned to look at Fan Zhong and smiled sinisterly. Fan Zhong's eyes trembled. He was stunned and speechless. "Are you speechless?" Nie Tianling laughed and said in a deep voice, "Flag Leader Fan, there are some things that I haven't thought through. I need you to give me an explanation." "Beacon Emperor, Fan Zhong's expression was extremely ugly. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he did not know what to say. "Hee." Nie Tian laughed again and said, "Flag Leader Fan, I want to know if you want to kill me because I defeated the Gia sect and disrupted your plan?" Chapter 4400. Omega 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 Omega. Choking with sobs. Novel. In the Great Hall, Nie Tian stared at Fan Zhong with a dark expression. His eyes were cold and filled with undisguised killing intent. The others were stunned by this scene, staring blankly at Nie Tian, their hearts in their throats. Even though Nie Tian had already revealed his identity as the Beacon Emperor, Fan Zhong was still an expert close to the peak of the Sky martial arts realm. Furthermore, he was the leader of the Sky Beacon flag. Nie Tian's forcefulness was a bit overbearing. Wasn't he afraid that Fan Zhong would be forced into a corner and take him down with him? Fan Zhong looked at Nie Tian and sensed the killing intent in the latter's eyes. His heart was in turmoil. He didn't think that Nie Tian would be so domineering, completely disregarding his strength and status. Under normal circumstances, even if Nie Tian was suspicious of him, he would have to bring out solid evidence and not interrogate him directly. Ling Shuang Wuchen was famous for being domineering in the Feng Tian Fate sect, but he was nothing compared to Nie Tian. "Flag Master Fan, is this your explanation for remaining silent?" Fan Zhong didn't speak for a long time. Nie Tian's face was gloomy. Sword intent surged around his body, and it was sharp and threatening. "Lord Beacon Emperor." Fan Zhong's eyes darkened and he finally said, "Even if you're the Beacon Emperor, you can't accuse me of colluding with the Gia sect without any evidence, right? When did I say that you were colluding with the Gia sect?" Nie Tianling chuckled. "I just don't understand your inexplicable killing intent. You want to kill me, so I want an explanation. Is that too much?" Zhong Yu's pupils constricted, and a chill ran down his spine. He was too nervous just now and actually made a slip of the tongue. Indeed, although Nie Tian had been hinting and guiding them, he had never mentioned that Fan Zhong was colluding with Gia sect. Fan, if he said it out loud, it would be a little like admitting that he was hiding something. "Sir Beacon Emperor, no matter what, you pretended to be a disciple of the Beacon Heaven Fate sect before revealing your identity. Just based on this, I have a reason to kill you." Fan Zhong forced himself to calm down and said in a deep voice. "Really?" Nie Tian sneered again. He then glanced at the others in the hall and said, "Then why don't you ask them why they don't want to kill me? Different identities lead to different thoughts. That's all." Fan Zhong smiled coldly. He was rather proud. Nie Tian smiled faintly. After a moment of silence, he said, "Fine, this emperor will accept Flag Master Fan's explanation for now. In that case, this emperor would like to ask Flag Master Fan, since this emperor has already revealed his identity, Flag Master Fan shouldn't have any killing intent towards this emperor, right?" "I wouldn't dare." Fan Zhong's face darkened. After a moment's pause, he lowered his head. No matter what, Nie Tian was the Beacon Emperor. At least in the Beacon Heaven Fate sect, he had a supreme status. No matter how unwilling Fan Zhong was, he could only obediently lower his head at this moment. "Very well." Nie Tian smiled and said, "This is my first time joining the sect, so of course I want to see a united and powerful Beacon Heaven Fate sect. I'm glad that Flag Master Fan is willing to lower your head." Saying that, Nie Tian took a step forward and pressed his hand on Fan Zhong's head. Fan Zhong's expression changed. He wanted to raise his head, but he was shocked to find that it was as if there was a mountain pressing down on his head. It was extremely difficult to resist. At such a close distance, it was almost a direct confrontation between their physique. Fan Zhong couldn't imagine that Nie Tian's physique was so powerful that it could almost suppress him when he had the upper hand. Upon seeing this, everyone's expression flickered as they stared at Nie Tian with incomparable astonishment. With putting his hand on Fan Zhong's head, Nie Tian actually dared to use such an insulting action on Fan Zhong. His courage was truly unparalleled. What was even more terrifying was that it wasn't that Fan Zhong didn't want to resist, but that he was being suppressed. On the other side, Shen Yunhe's face turned pale with fright. He never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that this Beacon Emperor, who had appeared out of nowhere, would be so domineering. Wen Luan and the others were even dumbstruck, and they were unable to recover from their shock for a long time. Fan Zhong was second only to Ling Shuangwuchen in the entire Fengtian Fate sect. But even Ling Shuangwuchen had to show due respect to Fan Zhong. He would never dare to do such a thing. Then, an even more shocking scene happened. "Flag Lord Fan, I don't care what you did in the past, but now that I'm here, you better behave yourself." Nie Tian suddenly raised his voice. Then, his large hand pressed down fiercely, forcing Fan Zhong's head down to his knees. It was as if Fan Zhong was kneeling before Nie Tian. "Brat you!" Fan Zhong was unable to endure such humiliation any longer, and he let out an explosive roar as his entire body erupted with power. Wave after wave of violent force charged at Nie Tian, but it was forcefully suppressed by Nie Tian. Wu-close combat was taboo in a battle between experts. Fan Zhong had been caught off guard by Nie Tian and had lost the initiative. It would be extremely difficult for him to reverse the situation. "Flag Lord Fan, are you trying to rebel?" Nie Tian's pupils shrank as he let out a thunderous roar. In the next moment, a wave of terrifying soul power poured directly into Fan Zhong's soul. Fan Zhong's body trembled, and his eyes lost focus for a moment. Soul attack. Seeing this scene, the others immediately reacted and exclaimed in unison. They could tell that Nie Tian had used a spirit attack. Who would have thought that such a young martial artist would have the mind power to suppress an expert at the peak of the sky martial arts realm? In fact, Nie Tian's mind power was already very strong. It was not weaker than an ordinary expert at the peak of the sky martial arts realm. However, he was far from being able to suppress an expert at the peak of the sky martial arts realm. He was only borrowing the mind power of the eternal night demon fox. Both now that he had made his move, he had to make Fan Zhong submit. In the next moment, Nie Tian made another shocking move. He took a step back and retreated several meters before letting go of Fan Zhong. The others were so shocked by this scene that they gasped. They couldn't believe their eyes. Nie Tian had let go of Fan Zhong. Was he trying to get himself killed? Everyone thought that Nie Tian would use this opportunity to control Fan Zhong or even kill him. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would let go of Fan Zhong? As soon as Fan Zhong broke free from the control, he actually roared furiously towards the sky like a mad lion. His hair and beard fluttered while the violent energy in his body surged, causing the entire Hall of Punishment peak to shake along with him. His eyes were bloodshot. And filled with killing intent as they locked onto Nie Tian, as if he would pounce on him and swallow him alive in the next moment. However, Nie Tian looked indifferent. He looked at Fan Zhong calmly and said, "Flag Leader Fan, I will ask you again. Do you want to rebel?" Fan Zhong's blood-red pupils instantly constricted. His entire body shook inexplicably, and he actually took a few steps back. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Fan Zhong. They didn't know what he was going to do. "I don't dare." Fan Zhong looked up at Nie Tian in silence for a full 10 seconds before he finally opened his mouth, his knees buckling as he dropped to his knees. Baidu search 881 Chinese Netyen. No advertising words. Chapter 4401. Fan Zhong had fallen to his knees. This scene stunned everyone on the spot, and they looked at Fan Zhong in disbelief. Fan Zhong, one of the 4 bannermen of the Feng Tian Fate sect and one of the peak experts of the sect, an existence second only to the sect master, Leng Shuang Wuchen, actually knelt before Nie Tian. Such a scene was simply incomprehensible. And moreover, those who were familiar with Fan Zhong knew that he was an extremely overbearing person. Sometimes, even Ling Shuang and Wuchen would have to avoid him. But yes, he actually knelt in front of a new Beacon Emperor who had just arrived at the Beacon Heaven Fate sect. The person who was the most shocked was none other than Shen Yunhe, the other flag chief. Shen Yunhe had the same status as Fan Zhong. Both of them were flag leaders, and both of them had the ambition to fight for the position of sect leader. The two of them had been fighting openly and secretly for many years, so Shen Yunhe knew Fan Zhong's character very well. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Shen Yunhe would never have believed that Fan Zhong would kneel before Nie Tian in front of so many people. This kneeling wasn't just a humiliation to one's dignity. More importantly, it was a lowering of one's position. Millimeter without a doubt, by kneeling, Fan Zhong had not only acknowledged Nie Tian's identity and name, but also Nie Tian's true status. He acknowledged that Nie Tian was a supreme existence in the Feng Tian Fate sect. But however, with Fan Zhong's character, how could this be possible? No, it must be that divine soul attack just now. There's something strange about it. Shen Yunhe's mind raced as he suddenly thought of something. Just now, when Nie Tian was suppressing Fan Zhong, he had released a divine soul attack, causing Fan Zhong to be momentarily absent-minded. It was definitely this divine soul attack that had changed Fan Zhong. "Flag Master Fan, please get up." After a short while, Nie Tian spoke indifferently and waved his hand to signal Fan Zhong to get up. "Yes," Fan Zhong replied respectfully as he slowly stood up. Shin Yunha's guess was right. The reason why Fan Zhong had such a drastic change was because of that spiritual soul attack. Though to others it was only a brief instant. However, to Fan Zhong it was like an endless nightmare. At that moment, he felt as if he had fallen into an endless abyss. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. That kind of despair, that kind of helplessness, that kind of living a life worse than death, was like a curse that was engraved into his soul. The moment he left the abyss, he wanted to resist. But when Nye Tian opened his mouth again, he recalled the feeling of despair he had just experienced. Moreover, Nye Tian's gaze was too terrifying. For a moment, he even felt that he might not be a match for Nye Tian even in a normal battle. Therefore, he was afraid and cowardly. In the end, he knelt. He knew that if he didn't kneel, Nye Tian would make him sink into the abyss forever. Flag Lord Fan, I don't care what happened to you in the Beacon Heaven Fate sect. I don't care what you did before. Nye Tian's expression calmed down as he looked at Fan Zhong and said, but from now on, I want you to always remember that you are the flag bearer of the Heaven Conducting Fate sect. Your duty is to protect the Heaven Conducting Fate sect and do your best for the sect. Do you understand? Yes. This subordinate understands. Fan Zhong could not help but shiver when he heard the last sentence. Then, he nodded heavily. Nye Tian had made it clear that regardless of whether Fan Zhong colluded with the Gia sect or not, he didn't want to pursue the matter. But from now on, Fan Zhong must be the flag lord of the Fire Heaven Fate sect and protect the school with his life. This was his duty as a flag lord. Very well. Nye Tian nodded slightly, looking very satisfied. Then, his gaze swept across the people in the hall, and eventually came to rest on Shin Yunha. Sir Beacon Emperor. Shin Yunha's expression changed after sensing the coldness in Nye Tian's eyes. Though he was trying to hide his nervousness, his tone was much more restrained. He even lowered his head, clearly showing his weakness. Flag Lord Fan wasn't the only one who wanted to kill me. Nye Tian's face was dark as he said in a cold voice, since Flag Master Fan has made it clear, then Flag Master Shin, please make it clear as well. The hearts of the others trembled. They hadn't expected Nye Tian to be so domineering. He first subdued Fan Zhong, then turned around and attacked Shin Yunha. Could it be that he was going to take in 2 flag masters in this hall? One, he knew that Ling Shuang Wuchen had been running the Fengtian Fate sect for many years, but he had not been able to unite Fan Zhong and Shin Yunha. Shin Yunha frowned and bowed his head. I was a bit impulsive because of my son. I was wrong. His gaze inadvertently swept past Fan Zhong, who was staring at him coldly, causing his heart to sink. Nye Tian's lips curled up coldly as he sneered. As a father, it's understandable for me to be so protective of my child. However, Flag Master Shin knows his mistake. Does your son know his mistake as well? Shin Yunha's expression changed when he heard Nye Tian mention Shin Qi. Sir Beacon Emperor, my son is young and impetuous. He has offended you. I apologize on his behalf to the Beacon Emperor. Please forgive him this time for my sake. How could he not realize that Nye Tian was going to make a move on Shin Qi? He had worked hard for half of his life and only had one son, Shin Qi. He viewed Shin Qi as his own flesh and blood. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so impulsive earlier. If Nye Tian wanted to kill Shin Qi, it would be the same as cutting his own flesh. Young and impetuous. Nye Tian pondered and smiled. Flag Master Shin, you're being too casual with your words. If Shin Qi only offended me, I wouldn't have bothered with him. However, Shin Qi's actions almost ruined the reputation of the Fengtian Fate sect. This is what I can't tolerate the most. As he spoke, Nye Tian's gaze locked onto someone. He raised his voice and said, Hall Master Qin Shanha, you were there when it happened and saw it with your own eyes. In that case, please tell us what happened in front of everyone. The Hall Master of the Hall of Sabers, Qin Shanha, was in the Great Hall and witnessed everything. He was extremely shocked. He hadn't had the time to rule over the higher-ups of the sect. He didn't expect to see Nie Tian easily subdue Fan Zhong. He was still in a daze. The first time he saw Nie Tian, he was deeply shocked by the latter's strength and talent. But only at this moment did he truly understand how formidable Nie Tian was. The new Beacon Emperor could be said to be the most unfathomable existence he had ever seen. Qin Shanhe came back to his senses and took a step forward. He recounted everything that happened before saying, "Sir Beacon Emperor, I wasn't able to stop it in time when it happened. Please punish me, and I'm willing to resign from my position as Hallmaster of the Hall of Sabers. We'll talk about your matter later." Nie Tian chuckled, then turned to Xin Yunhe and said, "Sectmaster Xin, you know what happened, right? Shen Qi almost killed hundreds of people who came to participate in the Fengtian Fate sect's selection. He didn't just kill innocent people, he also disregarded the prestige of the Fengtian Fate sect. Shouldn't he be killed for his actions?" Xin Yunhe felt a roar in his head when he heard the word kill. He felt a chill run down his spine. Look, Nie Tian meant that he wanted to kill Shen Qi to establish his prestige. Chapter 4402. Xin Yunhe felt Nie Tian's strong killing intent, and his expression changed. After what Nie Tian had done to Fan Zhong, how could he let Shen Qi off so easily? "Sir Beacon Emperor, I am willing to take responsibility for my son's mistakes," Xin Yunhe said as he stepped forward and bowed. His aura was extremely strong, and he faintly exuded a sense of oppression. "Accepting it on your son's behalf, Flag Master Shen is truly a good father," Nie Tianling smiled. "Then I would like to ask Flag Master Shen, are you willing to die in Shen Qi's place?" Xin Yunhe's expression changed in shock. He did not expect that his warning just now would not only fail to make Nie Tian wary, but it would also make him even more murderous. Could it be that Nie Tian was truly fearless and wanted to kill Shen Qi? Lord Beacon Emperor, Flag Master Shen. At this moment, someone else couldn't stand it anymore and stepped forward to speak. However, he was interrupted by Nie Tian halfway through his sentence. Nie Tian's face was gloomy, and his cold gaze swept across the crowd. He was like a ferocious beast, and his killing intent was extremely heavy. Just now, when Fan Zhong and Xin Yunhe were making things difficult for him, these people didn't move at all and just watched from the sidelines. Now, Nie Tian had yet to settle the score with them, but they were the first to plead for Shen Qi. How could Nie Tian tolerate this? Everyone felt the killing intent around Nie Tian's body that had almost condensed into substance, and all of them went silent like cicadas in winter, not daring to speak another word. "Beacon Emperor, aren't you afraid?" When Xin Yunhe saw this, he knew that Nie Tian was determined to kill him. His face darkened and he wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by Nie Tian. "Qin Shanhe, take Shen Qi." Nie Tian did not care about Xin Yunhe's expression and growled, "Yes." Qin Shanhe had never seen such a scene before. He was stunned at first, but when he reacted, he nodded immediately and turned to leave. He did not think that this new Beacon Emperor would actually be this domineering. Could it be that Nie Tian had some sort of backing that made him look down on Fan Zhong and Xin Yunhe? Qin Shanhe always felt that this new Beacon Emperor could not be seen through, but he did not think too much about it at this time. It was more important to bring Shen Qi here. The atmosphere in the hall was deathly silent, oppressive, and suffocating. Xin Yunhe's face was gloomy, and his eyes swept over Nie Tian from time to time. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he didn't. Soon, Qin Shanhe brought Shen Qi to the main hall. "Father!" Shen Qi was a little nervous at first, but when he saw that Xin Yunhe was in the main hall, his eyes lit up. Xin Yunhe, however, had a gloomy expression. He did not speak and only nodded slightly. Shen Qi frowned. He felt that something was wrong with Xin Yunhe's expression, but he didn't pay much attention to it. Then he saw Nie Tian and shouted, "Father, this is the bastard who hurt me. Help me kill him." Shut up. Shin Yunha's face darkened as he glared at Shin Chi. Both at this time, Shin Chi still couldn't see the situation. He was simply an idiot. Father, what's wrong with you? Shin Chi still did not react. He looked at Shin Yunha strangely and said, Didn't you say that you would kill this kid with your own hands to avenge me? I told you to shut up. Shin Yunha's face was extremely gloomy. He took a step forward, and suddenly a violent force pressed down on Shin Chi, making it hard for him to breathe. Father, Shin Chi spoke with difficulty, but he felt that the pressure was getting stronger and stronger, almost suffocating him. His whole body slowly bent down. Kneel. Shin Yunha growled, and his aura exploded. It directly pressed down on Shin Chi's knees, and he knelt in front of Nie Tian. Everyone seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. Obviously, they did not expect Shin Yunha to be so ruthless as to force Shin Chi to kneel in front of Nie Tian. Wasn't Flag Master Shin eager to protect his son? Why are you so ruthless towards your son now? Nie Tian smiled coldly, his eyes surging with a cold, murderous aura. How could he not know that Shin Yunha's actions were completely for him to see? Shin Yunha thought that by putting on a show and leaving enough face for Nie Tian would let Shin Chi go. But unfortunately, he underestimated Nie Tian's determination. Shin Chi did something wrong because I, as a father, did not teach him well. Shin Yunha's eyes darkened as he bowed and said, If Lord Beacon Emperor wants to punish him, then punish me as well. Seeing this, Shin Chi's eyes suddenly widened. He looked at Nie Tian in disbelief, as if he had seen a ghost. He would never have thought that Nie Tian was the Beacon Emperor. Flag Master Shin, I do not want to punish Shin Chi, I want to kill him. A cold smile appeared at the corner of Nie Tian's mouth as he said, Since Sect Master Shin said that you, as a father, are also responsible for your son's wrongdoings, I don't need to hide anything. Then, Nie Tian suddenly raised his voice. From today onwards, Shin Yunha is no longer the flag master of the Feng Tian Fate sect. He will be demoted to a protector and we will see what happens in the future. Everyone's expression changed simultaneously, and they gasped in shock on the spot. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would be so decisive as to take away Shin Yunha's position and demote him to a protector? Shin Yunha's pupils shrank as he looked up at Nie Tian, but didn't know what to say. What about me? Nie Tian's expression was cold and fearless. Do you disagree with my decision? Behind him, Fan Zhong's expression was cold and his aura had already locked onto Shin Yunha. Only if Shin Yunha dared to make a move, Fan Zhong would not hesitate to attack. Shin Yunha's chest tightened, but he could only swallow it back down. As for you, Nie Tianling chuckled and shifted his gaze to Shin Chi. Do you still remember what I said? Shin Chi finally let out a sigh of relief, but her tongue kept spinning, and she couldn't even speak properly. How could he not remember what Nie Tian said? The reason why he didn't kill him on the spot was because he would kill him in front of his father after entering the Feng Tian Fate sect. At this moment, Nie Tian was going to fulfill his promise. Shin Chi, don't worry. Out of consideration for Flag Master Shin's many years of hard work for the Feng Tian Fate sect, I will not kill you. The corner of Nie Tian's lips twitched. His eyes flashed with coldness. You won't kill me? Shin Chi was ecstatic to hear that Nie Tian would not kill him. Yes, I won't kill you. The corner of Nie Tian's lips curled up as his eyes emitted a cold light. He walked forward step by step and said, But I still have to fulfill my promise. You may be spared from death, but you cannot escape punishment. What do you want to do? Shin Chi felt the coldness in Nie Tian's eyes and his face turned as white as a sheet of paper. Shin Chi, I want you to remember this moment forever. As soon as Nie Tian took a step forward, a terrifying sword intent whizzed out. It was extremely sharp and fierce, and disappeared in a flash. Ah, my Yuan meridians! Shin-Chi's eyes quivered before he reacted and howled in pain. Just now, in just a split second, Nie Tian had used his sharp sword intent to sever all 9 of his yuan meridians. Nie Tian's attack was extremely ruthless. Shun now, he had become a cripple. Chapter 4403. Omega 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 Omega. Choking with sobs. Novel. The hall of the punishment peak was deathly silent. All eyes were focused on Nie Tian and Shin-Chi. No one thought that Nie Tian would dare to directly cripple Shin-Chi. Yet, to a martial artist, most of the time, strength was more important than life. This was especially true for someone like Shin-Chi, who regarded strength as the most important thing. Shin Yunhe's eyes trembled violently at first, and then he was stunned on the spot. Everything happened in an instant. He didn't even have the chance to stop it. Hiruntu. At this moment, Shin-Chi was paralyzed on the ground like a pile of mud, shivering, no longer as arrogant as before. Nie, however, Heaven's expression was calm as he said indifferently, Shin-Chi, since you indiscriminately killed those who were weaker than you, then this emperor will turn you into the weakest one. I'll let you have a good taste of what it feels like to be trampled upon by others. His face was filled with despair, and he was already crying like a dog. Ignoring Shin-Chi, Nie Tian turned to Shin Yunha and said, Flag Leader Shin, I didn't kill him for your sake. Shouldn't you say thank you? Shin Yunha's face trembled. The anger that he had suppressed in his chest erupted, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Nie, the heavens were too cruel. They had crippled Shin-Chi right in front of Shin Yunha, and they had even made Shin Yunha thank them. If you don't want to thank me, then don't thank me. Why are you so excited, Flag Master Shin? Nie Tian smiled faintly, and his eyes were extremely cold. Shin Yunhe's eyes were surging with rage, but he clenched his fists so tightly that his fingernails dug into his flesh. But in the end, he still endured and did not attack. Shin Yunhe didn't say anything else. He picked up Shin-Chi and turned to leave. Looking at Shin Yunha's back, Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I'll visit you again, Sect Master Shin. Shin. After Yunhe left, everyone in the hall looked at Nie Tian with trepidation, not daring to speak. From Fan Zhong to Shin Yunha, Nie Tian had already displayed his methods and strength, causing everyone to tremble with fear. Both if even Fan Zhong and Shin Yunha didn't have the ability to protect themselves, what could they do? Flag Leader Fan. At this moment, Nie Tian's lips curled into a smile as he spoke. Your subordinate is here. Fan Zhong did not dare to be negligent and immediately bowed in response. From now on, you are no longer a flag master. You will temporarily stay by my side as a guard. Nie Tian's expression was indifferent as he casually said. It's when the others heard Nie Tian's words, they couldn't help but be shocked, their faces filled with disbelief. The dignified Sky Beacon Flag Master, an existence second only to the Sect Master, was actually asked by Nie Tian to be a guard? Yes. Unexpectedly, Fan Zhong did not hesitate at all and gladly agreed. Resemblance to Fan Zhong, being a guard was better than being a flag commander. Then, Nie Tian asked everyone present to introduce themselves and clarify their identities. Hiruntu. At this time, there were more than 10 people in the Great Hall of the Punishment Peak. Other than Tang 13, Wenluan, and Fan Zhong, there were 3 protectors and 9 hall masters. These people were the higher-ups of the Feng Tian Fate sect. Deng, however, Sect Master Ling Shuang Wuchen and Altar Protector Chao Qiqing were not present. Wenluan said that Ling Shuang Wuchen was in seclusion and Chao Qiqing had been guarding the Sky Beacon altar. He wouldn't show himself unless there was something important. Everyone, I will let bygones be bygones. Nie Tian, who was sitting in the host's seat, glanced at the crowd and said, I won't hold you accountable for standing by and doing nothing. However, please remember that you are members of the Feng Tian Fate sect, and your positions in the sect are very important. Heaven's expression was solemn as he said, I do not have high expectations for you, but you must fulfill your responsibilities in your positions. Your subordinate will obey Beacon Emperor's teachings. Everyone felt Nye Tian's imposing manner and ambition, so they bowed and responded in unison. It had to be said that everyone was sincerely convinced of Nye Tian's abilities. Nye, although Heaven was young, his shrewdness and methods were far superior to others. Yes. To Fan Zhong and Shen Yunhe, who wanted to kill him, he directly established his dominance. But to others, he did not pursue the past, which was a sign of kindness. And using both force and force was the best way. Everyone, what do you think about the Sky Beacon selection? Nye Tian was very satisfied with everyone's reaction and asked with a faint smile. As the sound of his voice faded, the hall was deathly silent. Everyone's eyes flickered. It was obvious that they did not want to say anything. Nye Tian naturally knew what they were thinking. He smiled and said, "Everyone, I will postpone the Sky Beacon selection for a while." Postpone? Everyone was startled at first, but they immediately understood and said, "Beacon Emperor is wise." What Nye Tian meant was that he wanted to cancel the Sky Beacon selection. "Give me some time. I'm going to expand the selection in the Flame Heaven continent." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said with an indifferent expression, "Expand." Everyone was stunned once again, and they were completely dumbfounded. Who would have thought that Nye Tian wanted to postpone the Sky Beacon selection because he wanted to expand it? The Sky Beacon selection had already alarmed the entire 7 cultivators' sacred world. It even attracted the provocation of various sects like the Gia sect. Was that not enough? If he expanded the Sky Beacon selection, did he want the entire all-heaven sacred world to know? Yes. Nye Tian nodded and said, "Since the Heaven Beacon sect is going to hold an open selection, we naturally have to do it in a grand manner. I am going to spread this news to the entire all-heaven sacred world and select talents in the all-heavens." As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd burst into an uproar. Holding the selection in the all-heavens? Aren't we going to provoke all the sects in the all-heaven sacred world? Our Fengtian Fate sect is just a small sect. Any sect from a higher sacred world can destroy our sect if they come. Sir Beacon Emperor is still too young. This will bring disaster to the Heaven Beacon sect. Nye Tian heard all of their whispered discussions, but his expression didn't change at all. A while later, when the crowd quieted down, Nye Tian finally spoke, "Everyone, my words earlier were not to discuss with you all, but to inform you all." Everyone was stunned once again and was momentarily speechless. Nye Tian had already made up his mind, and it was impossible to change it. Nye Tian stood up and prepared to leave without saying anything else. Outside the hall, Nye Tian looked at Wen Luan and said, "Wen Luan, Mr. Ling is in seclusion, right?" "Yes." Wen Luan nodded and said, "Teacher was injured earlier and needs to cultivate for a period of time. However, he will definitely come out before the Sky Beacon selection begins." Nye Tian nodded and said, "I heard that Yurwen clan also has a banner master, right?" The Heaven Beacon sect had 4 banner masters. Fan Zhong and Shen Yunhe were only 2 of them. The other 2 were the fierce martial banner master, Du Wujuan, and the 4 calamity banner master, Wen Ho. "Yes." Wen Luan nodded and said, "My grandfather is a 4 tribulation flag master. However, he was injured in his early years, so he no longer cares about the sect's affairs. He only stays at home to recuperate. Bring me to see him." Nye Tian nodded slightly, his eyes glistening. "All right." Wen Luan was stunned for a moment before he nodded. After witnessing Nye Tian's methods, Wen Luan couldn't help but worry that Nye Tian wasn't planning on targeting the Wen clan, right? Baidu 681 Chinese Net. No advertising message.